Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Ben had never been happier to leave work early. After a long day filled with the anxiety of possibly being stuck on the night shift, a last-minute change allowed him to clock out by 11 p.m. With a smile on his face and a bounce in his step, he drove home, eager to surprise his wife, Kathy. He envisioned her face lighting up at the sight of him and couldn't wait to unwind together after such a demanding day. Thinking Kathy would be surprised since she believed he wouldn't return until morning, he picked up a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers on the way. However, as he pulled into the driveway, a creeping sense of confusion washed over him. Kathy's car was missing from the garage, and the house was dark. Everything felt off. At first, he shrugged it off, assuming she had run out for a late-night errand. But when he stepped inside, the silence felt unsettling. No lights were on, and there was no sign of Kathy anywhere. Where could she be? Ben muttered to himself, pulling out his phone. He dialed Kathy's number, tapping impatiently on the counter as he waited for her to pick up. Finally, she answered, but her voice sounded flat, almost annoyed. "Hey, Kathy, where are you?" "I got off work early," he said, his excitement fading. A long pause followed, and then Kathy's cold and dismissive tone came through. "I'm not coming home tonight." Ben blinked in confusion. "What do you mean you're not coming home? Should I repeat myself?" Kathy snapped, irritation clear in her voice. "You didn't understand the first time." His heart began to pound. "Kathy, what's going on? Why aren't you coming home?" "I've got some urgent work to take care of," she replied coolly. "Just don't bother me, okay? I'll be back tomorrow." Standing there with the phone pressed to his ear, Ben felt a wave of unease wash over him. Something was wrong. Kathy had never acted like this, so cold and dismissive. His initial confusion shifted to anger as he listened to her disinterested tone. "Kathy, this is ridiculous. Why are you being so disrespectful?" Ben's voice rose with frustration, his grip tightening around the phone. "We'll talk about this when you get home," Ben had said, but the line had already gone dead. As he stood in the empty house, the silence pressed down on him, and his mind raced with questions. Kathy's behavior wasn't just strange, it felt insulting. Anger simmered just below the surface, and as he stared out at the empty driveway, he vowed to uncover whatever was going on. Something was definitely wrong, and Ben wasn't about to let it go without answers. The next morning, he sat at the kitchen table, his jaw clenched in anticipation. When he heard the familiar hum of Kathy's car pulling into the driveway, his heart raced. As the door clicked open, she stepped inside, appearing as if nothing had happened. Kathy gave him a brief glance, as if she hadn't left him with a million questions the night before. "Morning," she said casually, her voice cool as she walked past him and headed straight for the stairs. "I'm going to take a shower." Ben's chest tightened with frustration. She wasn't even going to offer an explanation, not a word. The tension between them hung thick in the air, and as much as Ben wanted to confront her right then and there, he decided to hold off, letting her think everything was fine for a few moments. He waited until he heard the water running upstairs, then driven by an instinct he couldn't ignore, Ben went outside to check her car. Something wasn't adding up, and he wasn't the kind of man who would sit around chewing on uncertainty. The car was still warm from her drive. As he slipped inside, his eyes immediately landed on the tablet she always used for navigation. His fingers shook slightly as he tapped through the recent destinations. One address stood out. She had spent the night on the other side of the city, parked outside a house in a quiet neighborhood at 251 Oakwood Drive. Ben stared at the screen, his heart thumping heavily in his chest. Why would she have been there all night? Before he could let his mind race too far, he opened the glove compartment, unsure of what he was looking for. But what he found stopped him cold. An open box of protection, with one missing. His mind reeled. They hadn't used protection in years. There was no reason for this to be in her car. His hands felt numb as he closed the compartment, and a wave of betrayal washed over him. The dots were connecting in the worst possible way. He knew what Kathy had been doing. Ben walked back into the house, the shower still running upstairs. He sat at the kitchen table again, staring blankly at the floor as he waited for her to finish. The minutes dragged on, but the moment she stepped out of the bathroom, he was ready. Kathy came down the stairs with her wet hair wrapped in a towel, her face fresh and unconcerned. She glanced at him, but Ben's hard stare stopped her in her tracks. "What?" she asked, her tone already defensive. "We need to talk," Ben said, his voice low but firm. Kathy rolled her eyes. "About what now?" "About where you were last night." His gaze was unflinching as he watched her, waiting for her reaction. He held her car keys in his hand. Kathy's face darkened. What the hell, Ben? You were going through my car? My stuff? Answer the question. Ben shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Whose house is 251 Oakwood Drive? Why were you there all night? Kathy's eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Defiance? Ben couldn't quite tell, but she straightened her posture, crossing her arms. It's Roger's house, she said flatly. Ben felt his heart plummet. Roger? The guy from your office? Yeah, I stayed the night there. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Ben clenched his fists, trying to keep his temper in check. You think I'm an idiot? You spent the night at another man's house. I find protection in your car, and you want me to believe nothing happened? Kathy's eyes narrowed. So what if I stayed there? It's not what you think. Then what the hell is it? Ben's voice rose with anger. Tell me, is he your lover? Kathy exhaled slowly, her defensive tone softening. No, Ben. Roger's not my lover. Ben glared at her, his patience wearing thin. Then why were you at his house? And don't tell me some ridiculous lie. I deserve the truth. Kathy finally dropped her arms, her irritation shifting to something colder. Look, I had some problems at work, okay? Roger helped me out. He covered for me in front of our bosses. If he hadn't, I might have lost my job. I went over there to thank him. Thank him? Ben's eyes burned with disbelief. So what? You slept with him out of gratitude? Kathy's expression remained unchanged. It was my idea, Ben. Roger didn't ask for it. I knew he found me attractive, and I decided to give him something for helping me out. Ben's blood ran cold. You gave him something? You mean? He stopped, struggling to find the words. You slept with him as some kind of reward? Kathy's calmness was infuriating. Yes, she said simply. It wasn't cheating, Ben. It was just a transaction, a voluntary, honest deal. No feelings involved. Ben stared at her, utterly stunned. He had no words for how absurd, how cold this all sounded. You sold yourself for your career? Kathy looked at him without flinching. I gave him a little happiness in return for helping me. That's all. Ben's heart ached as the reality of her words sank in. Kathy, how could you even think that was okay? She shrugged. It was a professional courtesy. He did me a favor. I did him one. That's it. Ben felt his world collapse around him. He stared at Kathy, trying to process the absurdity of her words. She didn't flinch, didn't show a trace of remorse. Ben, she continued, her voice unervingly calm. I don't think we should dwell on this. You may be upset by what you've learned, but you know that you're my husband, and I love you. One night, one mistake shouldn't be the reason for a divorce or for ruining what we have. She said it as if she were smoothing over some minor inconvenience. Ben's mind whirled, his heart racing with disbelief. She wasn't merely asking for forgiveness. She was treating the whole thing as if it were something they could brush aside, as if it held no significance. Let's just forget about it, Kathy added, her tone breezy, as if suggesting they overlook an unpaid bill. Ben couldn't respond. His mouth felt dry, and his throat tightened under the weight of her betrayal. He sat there in stunned silence while Kathy's gaze wandered to the bouquet of flowers sitting on the counter, the very ones Ben had picked up the day before to surprise her after his early return from work. A smile broke across her face. Wow, honey, are these flowers for me? She asked, walking over to admire the vibrant petals, completely oblivious to the tension in the air. You're so good to me. She didn't wait for a reply. Instead, she turned to the bottle of wine he had brought home, popping it open with ease. Grabbing 2 glasses from the cabinet, she poured them both a drink, acting as if everything was perfectly normal, as if she hadn't just confessed to cheating on him for some twisted notion of career advancement. Kathy handed him a glass and raised her own in a casual toast. Ben, I'm sorry. Maybe I acted stupidly, but let's just forget about it and move on. Her tone was light, almost playful, as she took a sip of her wine, watching him over the rim of the glass. Ben sat frozen, his mind racing. He looked at her, trying to make sense of how effortlessly she brushed aside the enormity of what had just happened, as if her charm and sweet words could somehow erase the betrayal. The calmness with which she manipulated the situation made his blood boil. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. To her, this wasn't a mistake. It was just business as usual. Without a word, Ben drained his glass of wine and stood up. Kathy gave him a curious look, but he couldn't stay in that room any longer. The air felt suffocating, thick with her lies. He needed to clear his head. Stepping outside, Ben inhaled deeply, the cool morning air biting at his skin. He paced across the porch, running a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Kathy's betrayal cut deep, but what stung even more was how little she seemed to care. She expected him to shrug it off as if it were nothing and continue playing the role of the loving husband while she carried on, believing her actions had no consequences. But Ben understood now. This wasn't a one-time slip. Kathy's coldness, her calculated demeanor. It was clear to him that what she had done wasn't a mistake at all. It was a choice, a deliberate, selfish choice. Kathy might think she could walk all over him, make him look like a fool, but she had it all wrong. If she wanted to play games, he would play along for now, but on his terms. The more he thought about it, the clearer his plan became. Kathy wanted to make him feel like an idiot? Fine. He would let her believe she had succeeded. But before he handed her those divorce papers, before she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, he would give her something to remember. A small, elegant revenge, something she wouldn't see coming. As he stood there watching the world wake around him, Ben allowed himself the first small smile he'd felt in hours. Kathy thought she had control. She thought she could manipulate him. But she was about to learn what it felt like to be played. It was time to talk to a lawyer, but first, he had a little surprise to plan. Ben stood on the porch, his plan beginning to take shape in his mind. Kathy thought she had outsmarted him, but she had revealed her weakness, her career. That was the key. If her job meant so much to her that she would betray her marriage for it, then it was the perfect place to strike. Before Ben could set anything in motion, he needed an alibi. Something airtight that would put him far from home, far from suspicion. He took a deep breath and headed back inside, mentally shifting gears. He had to play the part of the forgiving husband for just a little longer. Kathy, he called as he walked into the kitchen, where she was casually sipping her wine. She looked up, her face softening as she noticed the change in his tone. He forced a small smile. "I've been thinking," Ben began, sitting back down across from her. "Maybe you're right. We've been through a lot together, and one mistake shouldn't tear us apart." Kathy's face lit up slightly, her smile returning as if she hadn't expected him to come around so easily. "I knew you'd see reason. Ben, we're stronger than this." He nodded, pushing down the resentment bubbling inside him. "Let's move on. I don't want to lose what we've built." Kathy reached across the table and took his hand, giving him a warm look as though everything had fallen neatly back into place. But Ben was already thinking ahead. She was playing right into his hands. The next morning, Ben went to work determined to make the next move. He headed straight to his boss's office, knocking on the door before stepping inside. When John, his manager, waved him in, Ben found him leaning back in his chair, clearly not expecting anything out of the ordinary. "Ben, what's up?" John asked. "I need a favor," Ben said, trying to sound casual. "I'd like to request a business trip to our production site in the next city. I think it's time for an inspection, and it would be good to get away for a bit." John raised an eyebrow. "A business trip? Now? You don't usually ask for that." Ben shrugged, trying to make it seem like no big deal. "Yeah, I've been under a lot of stress lately, and I think it would do me good. Plus, I can take a look at how things are running at the production site." "It's been a while since anyone went out there," John said, leaning forward and considering for a moment. "You know, I've been meaning to send someone out for an inspection. It could be a good opportunity for you." "How long do you need?" Ben asked, already picturing how this was going to play out. "A week should be enough," he replied. John nodded. "All right, I'll get the paperwork sorted today. You'll have everything you need by the end of the week." "Thanks, John. I really appreciate it," Ben said, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. Later that day, Ben received all the official documents for the business trip. Signed papers, company authorization, everything to make his absence completely legitimate. This was the alibi he needed. When he returned home that evening, he made sure to show Kathy the papers, casually handing them to her as they sat down for dinner. "Looks like I've got a business trip lined up," Ben said. "I'll be gone for a week starting Monday." Kathy glanced at the papers, her eyes scanning them before she handed them back. "A week? Huh? Well, I guess I'll miss you. But work is work, right?" "Exactly," Ben said, keeping his tone even. "Just part of the job." Kathy smiled, not a hint of suspicion in her eyes. She believed him completely, and that was exactly what Ben wanted. Over the next few days, Ben set the wheels of his plan in motion. With his alibi secured, he focused on finding the right people to help him execute his revenge. After some searching, he connected with a group of young event planners who specialized in flash mobs and creative pranks. They were used to organizing all kinds of public stunts, and Ben's request intrigued them. Ben met with the group in a small cafe a few miles from his house. He laid out the details of what he wanted. A a carefully orchestrated scene that would leave Kathy rattled, confused, and humiliated. But nothing that would cross the line into anything truly harmful. It had to be elegant, subtle, but devastating. Okay, so you want us to stage a show? One of the organizers asked, intrigued but slightly confused. Ben nodded, his expression serious. Exactly. I need something that will make her think she's losing her mind. Something she'll never see coming. It needs to feel personal, like she's being exposed for who she really is, but in a way that makes her question everything. The group exchanged glances, already brainstorming ideas. We can do that, one of them said, smiling. We've done this sort of thing before, and trust me, if you want her to feel the heat, we can deliver. On Monday morning, Ben left for his business trip with all the official papers in order. Kathy saw him off without much thought, believing that everything between them had returned to normal. She had no idea what was coming. Like any other day, Kathy started her morning routine by heading to the cafe near her office for her usual coffee and croissant. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air as she stepped inside the familiar atmosphere, giving her a sense of comfort. She placed her order and waited at the counter as the barista prepared her coffee. Just as Kathy reached for her cup, a man in a sharp business suit walked up beside her. He glanced at her as if recognizing her from somewhere, then gave a slight knowing smile. "Oh, it's you," he exclaimed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I recognized you. You're the Ben woman who thanks her colleagues at work, in bed. How kind you are." Kathy froze, the words hitting her like a slap. She stared at the man, her heart racing. "Excuse me," she stammered, utterly confused. The man chuckled, his expression serious but laced with unsettling amusement. "It's just so generous of you, really. Not many people would be that giving to their coworkers." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Kathy standing there, stunned. She stood in silence for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Surely, this was some kind of mistake. Maybe he had confused her with someone else. Shaking it off, she quickly grabbed her coffee and croissant and left the cafe, her mind spinning but determined to move on. The next day, Kathy found herself back at the cafe, though the strange encounter from the previous morning lingered in her mind. She was trying to forget it. People made weird comments all the time. It didn't mean anything. As she approached the counter to place her order, an elderly gentleman dressed impeccably shuffled up beside her. His eyes widened as he saw her, and he turned to face her with a warm smile. "Oh, madam," he exclaimed, his voice full of admiration. "I've heard about your generosity. It's truly inspiring. Sharing your body for the sake of career success. What a real feat of sacrifice." Kathy's face went pale. She blinked at the man, speechless, a pit forming in her stomach. What are you talking about?" she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly man waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so modest. Word travels fast about people like you. So selfless, so accommodating in the workplace. Quite the story." He smiled one last time before turning away. Kathy's hands trembled as she picked up her coffee, her mind racing. This wasn't a coincidence. Twice now, strangers had approached her making these awful, insinuating comments. But how? How did they know? She left the cafe in a daze, the weight of paranoia beginning to settle in her chest as she walked to her office. Her thoughts kept circling back to that night with Roger. No one else knew about it. No one except him. By the middle of the week, Kathy was on edge, her nerves frayed. She had convinced herself that maybe the previous encounters were flukes, random, unconnected comments. But as she stepped into the cafe that morning, the familiar dread washed over her. She placed her order and waited, glancing around nervously. Just as the barista called her name, a young woman with a tray walked up beside her, balancing several drinks in her hands. She smiled brightly as if recognizing Kathy. "Oh, you're that Kathy, right?" the girl said, her voice cheerful. "My friend works with you and told me about how kind you are, especially to the men at the office." She winked playfully. "Thank you for being so caring." Kathy's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her coffee and bolted from the cafe, her mind now in a full-blown panic. This wasn't random anymore. Someone knew, and it was spreading. By the time she made it to her office, Kathy could barely focus. Her phone sat heavy in her hand as she dialed Ben's number, needing some kind of reassurance, some explanation. "Ben, something weird is going on," she blurted out as soon as he picked up. "People, strangers, they're saying things about me, about that night. It's like they know, Ben. They know." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Ben spoke, his tone sharp and irritated. Kathy, why are you bringing this up again? I thought we agreed to forget about it, Ben said, his voice thick with irritation. I know, but this is different, she stammered, desperation creeping into her tone. Someone's spreading rumors, I think. Or are you involved in this? Her voice cracked as she sought answers. Ben sighed, exasperated. Kathy, seriously? You think I'm behind this? I told you I've moved on. Why can't you? Ben, please, Listen. Ben cut her off, his voice firm. I'm busy with work. I don't have time for this nonsense. A moment later, the video call connected, and there he was, walking through the production floor, wearing a hard hat and safety vest. See? I'm here handling real work. I don't care about the past, Kathy. Stop bothering me with this. Kathy's heart sank as she watched him navigate the factory, his expression detached and focused on his job. I'm sorry, she whispered, feeling foolish. It's strange. I've got to go, Ben said briskly. Don't call me unless it's important. With that, the call ended, and Kathy sat back in her chair, confusion swirling with fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that everyone knew, that somehow her secret had been exposed. Then it hit her like a cold wave. Roger. He was the only other person who knew. Could he be behind this? Or had he let something slip? As the pieces started to fall into place, Kathy's panic deepened. She had to find out if Roger had betrayed her, but for now, she was trapped in a whirlwind of fear, unsure of whom she could trust and desperately trying to maintain her crumbling facade. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Every part of her was frazzled by the strange encounters and the eerie feeling that her secret was no longer hers alone. She found Roger in his office, sitting at his desk, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. Kathy walked in, closed the door behind her quietly, and took a deep breath. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of her frustration and fear. Roger, she hissed, leaning in close so no one outside could hear. Did you tell anyone about our meeting? Roger looked up, his expression confused. Kathy, what are you talking about? Kathy's eyes narrowed. You know what I mean. About that night. Did you open your mouth and tell anyone? Roger's face paled as he grasped what she was accusing him of. No, of course not. I wouldn't. Don't lie to me, Kathy snapped, her voice still low but filled with anger. If management finds out, we'll be fired. Roger, you know the company's rules. No romantic relationships between employees. She took a step closer, her frustration boiling over. Are you an idiot? Do you have any idea what could happen to both of us? Roger, visibly shaken, raised his hands in defense. Kathy, I swear, I didn't tell anyone. I wouldn't risk my career over this. You know me better than that. Kathy studied his face, searching for any sign of deceit, but all she saw was confusion and fear. Her anger simmered as she backed away, her heart pounding even harder. If Roger wasn't the one spreading rumors, then who was? She left his office, her thoughts spinning in a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief. The strange encounters, the comments from strangers, it didn't make any sense. A cold shiver of dread washed over her. Was she losing her mind? Was someone playing a twisted game with her? The rest of the day dragged on, each minute weighed down by her growing paranoia. By the time she was ready to leave the office, Kathy's nerves were frayed to the edge. She clutched a folder of documents to her chest as she stepped out of the building, lost in her thoughts. Suddenly, a young guy bumped into her, the impact knocking the folder from her hands. Papers scattered across the pavement, fluttering in the breeze. Oh, I'm so sorry, the guy said quickly, bending down to help her collect the papers. Kathy knelt down beside him, her frustration barely held in check. It's okay. It's my fault. I wasn't paying attention, she said, her voice strained as she grabbed the last of the documents. Thanks for helping. The guy smiled, his eyes glinting with a strange look. No need for verbal thanks, he said smoothly, standing up and brushing himself off. You can thank me by giving me a night with you for saving your documents. Kathy's heart skipped a beat, her eyes locking onto his in disbelief. What did you just say? She asked, her voice shaky. The guy's grin widened. I can see it in your eyes. You like to thank men, especially when it's career-related, right? Kathy's temper flared, and before she could stop herself, she threw the folder at him. You sick scumsucker, she shouted, her voice trembling with fury. I won't leave a wet spot of you. He laughed, a sinister chuckle that sent chills down her spine. Without another word, he turned and sprinted down the street, disappearing around the corner before she could even think to chase him. Breathing heavily, Kathy stood frozen in place, her body trembling with a mix of rage and fear. She felt like the ground was slipping beneath her feet. Everywhere she turned, someone was reminding her of that night, mocking her as if the whole world had found out her secret. That evening, Kathy sat in her dimly lit living room, a glass of wine clutched tightly in her shaking hands. She had barely touched her dinner, her stomach in knots, her mind replaying the events of the last few days over and over again. Her heart raced, and no amount of wine seemed to calm her nerves. She felt like she was unraveling. Nothing made sense anymore. Who were these people, and how did they know? Or worse, was she losing her mind? The more she thought about it, the more she wondered if she was imagining it all. Was the guilt of what she'd done with Roger driving her to paranoia? Her hands trembling, Kathy grabbed her phone and opened the browser, her fingers hovering over the screen for a moment before she typed in a search. Psychotherapists near me? As the list of names appeared on the screen, she stared at it blankly, the realization sinking in. She needed help. Either someone was playing an elaborate and cruel game with her, or her mind was betraying her. Either way, she knew one thing for sure. She was teetering on the edge of something she couldn't control. By Friday morning, Kathy was on edge, her nerves frayed from the week's strange encounters. Determined to avoid any more awkward or humiliating situations, she made a decision. No coffee stop, no lingering on the street. She headed straight for the office, hoping that throwing herself into work would calm her down. She needed to forget the past few days and focus. Maybe, just maybe, this day could pass without incident. By the time the other employees started trickling into the office, Kathy was already at her desk, furiously typing away. As the hours passed, a strange sense of calm washed over her. For the first time in days, she felt like she was regaining control. The office buzzed with the usual morning chatter, and Kathy breathed a small sigh of relief. Finally, she thought, some peace. But that peace didn't last long. About an hour later, just as she was starting to feel normal again, the office door swung open, and a courier walked in, holding a massive bouquet of red roses. The sight immediately drew attention, heads turning from all corners of the office. The courier, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air, made his way to the middle of the room and loudly announced, "Delivery for Kathy." The words hit her like a shockwave. Kathy's stomach twisted into knots as she stood up, already feeling the heat of everyone's gaze. Several of her colleagues, curious and amused, gathered around to see what was happening. Kathy approached the courier, her heart racing. "I didn't order anything," she said sharply, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why do you think these flowers are for me?" The courier gave her an innocent shrug, then pulled out a small card tucked between the roses. Clearing his throat, he began reading the note aloud, his voice loud enough for everyone in the office to hear. "For the sexiest and most divine Kathy, who made me happy that magical night. Signed, Roger." The room went silent for a split second before laughter and whispers erupted around her. Kathy felt the blood drain from her face as she stood there, frozen in horror. She could hear the stifled giggles of her co-workers, the murmured comments, the judgmental eyes scanning her from head to toe. It was a nightmare come to life. Without thinking, Kathy lunged forward and knocked the bouquet out of the courier's hands, sending roses scattering across the floor. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, her voice trembling with fury and humiliation. "What kind of disgusting joke are you playing?" Her colleagues, some still laughing, looked on in shock as Kathy's outburst continued. She couldn't stop herself. Her nerves had finally snapped. People whispered, exchanged glances, and a few even tried to calm her down. But Kathy was beyond reasoning. "Kathy, relax," one of her co-workers said, though the smirk on her face made it clear she wasn't taking any of this seriously. But to Kathy, it was a nightmare, and the fact that Roger wasn't even there to explain himself only made it worse. In an ironic twist, Roger was absent because he had been sent to another office at their boss's behest. As Kathy tried to catch her breath, shouting obscenities at the courier, who was now frantically backing away, the door to the boss's office flew open. Mr. Brown strode out, his face a mix of confusion and concern. He took one look at the chaos, Kathy screaming, the bouquet on the floor, and the courier practically running for the exit, and quickly stepped into the middle of it. "What the hell is going on here?" Mr. Brown demanded, his eyes darting from Kathy to the scattered flowers and the note, which he bent down to pick up. He quickly scanned the words on the card, his face hardening with each passing second. "Kathy," he said sternly, holding the note up, "what have you done? What's going on? And how are we supposed to understand this?" Kathy, still shaking with anger, couldn't seem to form a coherent response. Her mind was a blur of rage, fear, and shame. While her co-workers watched, their whispers growing louder. "Kathy," Mr. Brown pressed, his voice growing sharper. "Did Roger really send you these flowers? Are you two in a relationship? You're married, Kathy, and you know the company policy?" "No, no," Kathy screamed, her voice cracking. "This is all a setup, some kind of sick joke. I would never." But the words caught in her throat, and her hands trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Brown eyed her carefully, his brow furrowing in concern and suspicion. "Kathy," he said slowly, "you're not making any sense. You're acting irrationally. If Roger's involved in this, I need to know now. Otherwise, you're putting your entire career at risk." Kathy's heart raced as she looked around the room. The judgment, the laughter, the suspicion all closed in on her like a vice. "It's not true," she shouted again. But her voice was weaker now, less convincing. I don't know what's happening. Someone is trying to ruin me." Mr. Brown took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his patience. "Kathy, you need to calm down." Her eyes darted wildly around the room. Her colleagues stared at her with a mix of amusement and pity, some trying to suppress their laughter, others exchanging knowing glances. It was too much. She couldn't take it anymore. Mr. Brown stood in the center of the chaotic scene, watching as Kathy trembled with rage and frustration. He could see she was on the edge of a breakdown, her face pale, her hands shaking. He knew he had to diffuse the tension, not just for Kathy's sake, but for the entire office, which was now buzzing with whispers. With a forced smile, Mr. Brown raised his voice, trying to sound casual. "All right, everyone, enough staring. Let's get back to work. What kind of joke is this anyway?" He attempted to inject some lightness into the situation, his cheerful voice deep and playful, hoping to soften the mood. "Kathy, calm down," he added, still smiling. "Why don't you take a couple of days off? We'll figure this out. You and Roger can take a lie detector test if it'll clear things up. No one will doubt your integrity. Trust but verify, right?" He chuckled, clearly not serious, hoping to break the tension and brush the whole thing off as a misunderstanding. But what Mr. Brown didn't realize was that Kathy was already far beyond reason. At his words, something inside her snapped. "Yes, I slept with Roger," she screamed, her voice raw with fury and humiliation. The entire office went dead silent. "I rode him like a young stallion, and I enjoyed every second of it. And all of you? You're just a bunch of miserable, nosy scumsucker trying to stick your noses into someone else's life." Gasps echoed through the room, and people exchanged wide-eyed looks. Kathy's face flushed as she realized what she had just said, but the dam had already burst. Tears welled up in her eyes as she grabbed her purse in a wild rush and ran toward the door, her sobs filling the otherwise silent office. As Kathy stormed out, she collided with Roger, who had just returned from his assignment. He was clueless about what had just transpired, his usual confident posture faltering when he saw the state Kathy was in. "Tell them, Roger," Kathy shouted, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell them how we were tumbling around at your place. They're all dying to know the details because their lives are boring and gray, stuck in this office." Roger froze, his face draining of color. His knees trembled slightly as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. His wide eyes darted around the room, taking in the shocked faces of their coworkers. Kathy's words hung in the air like a thick, suffocating cloud. "Kathy, why did you tell everyone about this?" "It was our secret," Roger asked weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked utterly lost, as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. "So it's true?" Mr. Brown asked, his voice heavy now, devoid of any humor. His eyes locked on Roger, who stood there like a deer caught in headlights. "There was something going on between you two?" Roger looked down at the floor, his face ashen as he mumbled, "I didn't tell anyone. I swear I didn't." Mr. Brown pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling heavily. "Well, that's it then," he muttered, his voice barely loud enough for the closest onlookers to hear. He looked at Roger with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. "Roger, we need to have a conversation. Now." As Roger followed Mr. Brown into his office, the rest of the staff erupted into a quiet murmur, exchanging glances and hushed comments about what had just unfolded. Kathy's breakdown, her shocking confession, and Roger's stunned reaction had thrown the office into complete disarray. Ben returned home on Saturday, feeling a mix of satisfaction and curiosity. He had orchestrated part of Kathy's downfall, but he had no idea how far things had spiraled out of control while he was away. The moment he walked into the house, the air felt heavy, thick with tension. He found Kathy in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a glass of wine clutched in her trembling hand. Her eyes were wild, a mix of depression and madness. The woman who once carried herself with such confidence now looked completely broken. Ben could sense that something terrible had happened. The moment Kathy saw him, her expression twisted into fury. "You!" she screamed, rising to her feet. "You did this. You set me up, didn't you? You planned all of it." Ben took a step back, raising his hands in a gesture of defense. "Kathy, calm down. What are you talking about? I didn't do anything." But Kathy wasn't listening. She advanced on him, her eyes filled with rage and desperation. "You wanted to ruin me. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone." "Kathy," Ben said gently, trying to keep his voice calm, "I'm your husband. I wouldn't do that to you. I didn't arrange anything. Let's just talk, okay?" Kathy's hands shook violently as she stood inches from him, her face pale with anger. Then, without warning, she lunged toward the counter, grabbing a large kitchen knife. She turned back to him, holding the blade in her hand, her eyes crazed. "I'll make you pay for this," she screamed, waving the knife towards Ben. "You think you can destroy me and walk away?" Ben's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't lose his composure. He slowly backed away, pulling his phone from his pocket as he dialed 911. "Kathy, put the knife down," he said as calmly as possible, his voice low but firm. "You're not thinking straight. You need help." Kathy continued to rant, her grip on the knife tightening. "You ruined my life, Ben. You made me look like a fool. You set me up, you monster." Within minutes, the police arrived, bursting through the door and quickly assessing the situation. Kathy, still holding the knife, was screaming incoherently as they gently disarmed her and led her away. Her face was a mask of pure anguish, and her words had descended into a stream of jumbled nonsense. As Kathy was taken away in handcuffs, Ben felt a strange mixture of pity and relief. She wasn't in her right mind anymore. It was over. At the hospital, the doctors diagnosed Kathy with a severe nervous breakdown, placing her under temporary psychiatric care. Ben knew this was his opportunity to finally end things. While Kathy was undergoing treatment, he took the steps he had been planning for weeks. He quietly withdrew a large sum of money from their joint account, moving it into a private one. With the help of his lawyer, Ben drafted the divorce papers, preparing for the final stage of his revenge. When Kathy returned home, she found the house empty, with a stack of papers waiting for her on the kitchen counter. Ben had moved out and left no explanation other than the divorce documents and a note instructing her not to contact him. The moment Kathy realized what was happening, her anger flared once more. Days later, she contacted Ben, furious over the missing money, accusing him of stealing from her. Ben was ready for her. When they met face to face, his expression was calm but steely. "I didn't steal anything, Kathy," he said, his voice cold. "But I'll tell you this. Our house cameras have footage of you attacking me with a knife. If you want to play this game, I can easily press charges for attempted murder." Kathy's face went white as she grasped the gravity of his words. Ben stepped closer, his tone dripping with icy resolve. "You've gone crazy, Kathy. You did all of this yourself. I tried to live like you wanted, like nothing had happened. But you destroyed it with your lies and your insanity." Kathy's anger turned to panic, but she knew Ben had her cornered. You can't do this," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Oh, I can," Ben replied, his voice steady. "And I already have. You're not getting a dime from me. You've lost everything, and if you push me any further, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what happened." With no options left, Kathy signed the divorce papers. She lost her job, her reputation was ruined, and Roger was fired as well. Their office scandal had spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Ben walked away free from the nightmare Kathy had created, his revenge complete. This was Ben's harsh, calculated revenge. He had been patient, had played the role, and now Kathy's own actions had brought about her downfall. The thrill of victory coursed through him as he realized he had finally escaped the chaos she had wrought and reclaimed control over his life. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
As I sat pondering the recent events, I couldn't identify any specific signs indicating she was being unfaithful, no matter how hard I tried. The unease I felt stemmed from numerous small details accumulating rather than one glaring issue. There was definitely something going on, yet I couldn't grasp what it was. I was certain of some mischief, but lacked evidence. I was clueless about who, what, or where this was happening, to the point where I questioned my own sanity. Am I reading too much into this situation? Perhaps I'm exaggerating, conjuring various scenarios of her infidelity, but with whom? I couldn't say, yet my gut churned with uncertainty. I sensed, rather than knew, that something was amiss. Perhaps this marked the onset of an affair, possibly a one-time occurrence. The more I dwelled on thoughts and fantasies, the more self-assured I felt. It seemed like I'd been in this mental space for weeks, but how long had it been before I even slightly sensed something was amiss? I took another sip of my JD. The clinking ice signaled a need for a refill. Catching the bartender's eye, he nodded and smoothly exchanged my glass for another double JD on the rocks. He offered a faint smile, seemingly understanding my inner turmoil. He had encountered that expression countless times. His gaze conveyed both support and empathy as he noticed the distress in my eyes. The sweet taste of JD warmed my mouth and throat with each sip. I resolved to calm myself, scanning the bar and observing a few other patrons. It was serene, the murmurs of conversation filling the air with incomprehensible words, amplifying my growing sense of discontent. There was no happiness here. The patrons' faces were devoid of emotion, blending into the crowd without distinction. Everyone seemed plain and unremarkable. The lone woman, appearing to be in her 40s and slightly overdressed for the time and place, perhaps appeared a bit desperate, was being treated to drinks by an older man who seemed hopeful and attentive towards her. He didn't need to try so hard. I figured she already had his number. The other patrons appeared to be simply passing time while the rain outside further dampened the mood, and soon they would each run out of reasons to linger in the comfort of the bar and head home. I still haven't made up my mind about what I'm going to do. So, what's going on? I turned toward the voice. She gazed at me, her eyes peering deep into my soul. Though I thought I opened my mouth to respond, no words came out. She stood in the dimly lit bar, water dripping from her coat as she began to remove it. "What brings you here, Sammy?" "I was worried about you and had a hunch I'd find you here. So here I am. Do you want to talk?" I looked at her, trying to regain some composure. "Are you concerned about me? Why? What's happening?" I scrutinized her, wondering if she had any hidden motives. Could I trust her? I took a sip of my JD and ordered her a drink and soda, which the bartender served with flair. Smiling at the sight of Sammy, she caught his eye as he served her, flashing one of his charming smiles as his gaze lingered on her ample bosom accentuated by her tight blouse. Sammy waited until the bartender walked away before addressing the situation. There was a mutual sense of uncertainty between us, along with an unspoken power struggle. I mentioned concerns about her recent behavior, indicating that she appeared burdened. I expressed a desire for her to share what was going on. When I looked into her brown eyes, I was reminded of how effortlessly she understood me, like an open book. This understanding between us was something I deeply valued. Despite occasional disagreements, we maintained a transparent and honest relationship. However, there were certain things we didn't explicitly discuss, yet we both understood them. She reassured me, saying she was fine, and that our relationship was in a good place, alleviating my worries. I watched as she processed my words. It was clear she wasn't buying it. My heart sank, and I tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered. Sammy took a deliberate sip from her glass, her gaze penetrating into mine once more. Oh, God. This is it, I thought. She set her glass down and interlocked her fingers, leaning slightly forward toward me. I tried to play it cool by asking what she knew and what I was supposedly hiding. She responded by suggesting we drop the act and be genuine with each other. This caught the attention of the bartender, who subtly turned his head to listen in. She then proposed we find a more private booth, as the current setting was too public. As we moved to a secluded booth, I could see disappointment on the bartender's face. Once seated across from each other, the tension was palpable as we prepared for our forthcoming conversation. I mentioned that I had competed in a tournament and asked for her opinion. She saw through my attempt at deception and reminded me that we had known each other for a long time. She urged me to confide in her, mentioning her familiarity with Sammy since she was 17. She noted that Sammy had always been around and had once had a crush on her when she dated Sammy's sister, Claire. Claire was 3 years older, and we began dating when we were both 20. Sammy and I always got along, much to the displeasure of her older sister. They were as different as night and day in many ways, but their personalities clashed often, evidenced by the numerous quarrels between the sisters over the years. 2 years later, Claire and I tied the knot and envisioned what I believed to be an ideal future. We both held respectable jobs and earned enough to lead a comfortable life. My sister-in-law, Sammy, had her share of fun in her late teens and early 20s, and now, at 25, was seeking something more mature. I felt like she had outgrown her wild phase and had become someone any man would be fortunate to know. Claire and I have been married for 5 years. Well, we'll reach 5 in a month when our anniversary arrives. That's if we make it that far, I thought. Sammy is a very attractive woman, and someone I considered a friend, as well as my sister-in-law. Tears welled in my eyes as I gazed at her, searching for words to express how I felt. But still, her words, I know, resounded loud and clear in my mind. She reached across the table, her fingers caressing mine before squeezing them tightly, a gesture of support, and more, as I felt my heart slowly shattering. All right, Steve, if you won't tell me, then I'll say it. She's cheating on you. I'm pretty sure you know this. Of course I know. What are you going to do about it now? My eyes widened at those words, yet I still resisted understanding as I stubbornly tried to rationalize what I knew and what it meant. I didn't want to hear anything anymore. In my mind, if I didn't truly know, then it couldn't have happened, and thus, it couldn't have hurt me. I wouldn't have to deal with it either. Sammy gazed at me, noticing the distant look in my eyes. Was it shock or denial? Steve, I love you dearly, but for goodness sake, wake up. I'm sure it's some kind of misunderstanding or something. I attempted to brush it off and deceive myself further. Suddenly, Sammy's eyes flashed with anger. She reached out and slapped me hard across the face. The bartender halted, wiping the glass he held. Everything all right over there? I raised my hand. Yes, everything's fine here. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat from the slap, and certain Sammy's perfect handprint lingered there. I'm sorry, Steve, but sometimes you drive me crazy. You know how much I care about you, and I can't bear to see you hurt like this. So be wise and courageous. This is happening, and we need to address it. I swallowed, rubbing my cheek, as the seriousness of my situation sank in, the pain from her slap jolting me to reality. All right, I'll start. I'm sure you at least suspect something, but I'll continue anyway. A few weeks back, I was with her when her cell phone rang. She stepped out to answer it, which struck me as odd, considering we're sisters, darn it. What could she be hiding from me? I nodded, bracing myself for the worst. But as I sipped my JD, she continued. I just found it peculiar. So when I had the chance, I checked her phone. She's so trusting. There wasn't even a lock code on it. The call was from a guy in her contacts who introduced himself as Robert. I had no clue about any Robert or Bob, but I decided to keep an eye out for any recurrence. So who's this guy, Robert or Bob? I inquired, trying to recall any mention of this name. I actually found out about him roughly a week later. He's someone she knew years ago, before she even started dating you. Anyway, it seems he reached out to us through some social network or chat site. Looks like they've been messaging each other for a while now. But I had no idea. All I sensed was that there were these little things happening that seemed to fly under the radar. Yeah, I get it. But it all seemed to fit into their interactions. Nothing overt, but it felt like everything was aligning for them. So it's just two friends messaging each other, reminiscing about the old days or something? It seems that way. That's how it began, anyhow. Are you implying something happened? Yes. And you're saying you didn't detect anything suspicious? Just that it felt like circumstances were working against us. Plus, the glaring absence of opportunities for fun. Sammy regarded me with an incredulous expression, as if I were being foolish. What? I returned her gaze. Steve, I care about you deeply, but come on, snap out of it. Reality sank deeper into my foggy mind as her words grew increasingly real. Damn, I thought this was serious. Taking another sip, I mustered my courage. How far do you think it went? Or do you know? Sammy met my gaze. Her eyes gleamed, briefly averting before locking back onto mine. That fleeting glance told me everything I needed to know. When? How? Where? I queried hastily. My mind raced to catch up as anger began to simmer within me. The battle between reason, sensibility, and raw fury had commenced. I know she's seen him at least 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Initially, I wasn't certain, and it was only 2 days ago that I confirmed it had escalated. I was having lunch with a friend who works alongside Claire, and she accidentally let it slip. I didn't react then, and Claire hit it well, so I let it slide. Turns out she met him twice for lunch and at least once for dinner last week. Does this align with what you observed? I studied her, absorbing her revelations. There have been a couple of instances recently where I phoned her office to arrange a lunch meeting, but she wasn't there. Or she had just left. Was that when she met him? Then? Last week she attended a seminar that she insisted on going to. It was announced last minute and scheduled for after work that evening. She returned home late, past midnight, reminiscing about the event. She mentioned it had dragged on, and her team went for a drink at the hotel bar before leaving. I also recall there was no closeness that night, and she took a shower before bed. My thoughts raced. My mind swirled in confusion as I absorbed these painful truths, each one intensifying the agony and twisting the knife lodged firmly in my heart. To hell with all this, I suddenly spat. Sammy glanced at me, her eyes now reflecting concern. Steve, what's your plan? Don't do anything reckless. You don't want to end up in legal trouble because of her. Meeting her gaze, I sensed she had detected the shift in me. My face felt like stone, my heart a solid block of granite. My body braced for what lay ahead, and she could see it. To hell with all this. I refuse to tolerate this under any circumstances. It ends now. She'll pay. He'll pay too. Rage bubbled within me. My muscles tightened, fists clenched. I've never been one for violence. Sure, I've had my fair share of confrontations in my younger days, but I never sought out trouble. Sometimes you simply must confront the truth, which is precisely what I intended to do. It had been a while, but it needed addressing and fast. Steve, whatever you're thinking, take a moment. Consider your options. Don't act hastily without a plan. Otherwise, things will spiral out of control. You need to strategize and prepare. Otherwise, you'll only end up getting hurt, she cautioned. Her words tempered my rage, penetrating the rational part of my brain and making sense. Strangely enough, it helped me to regain some composure, realizing that my suspicions were indeed valid. At least I wasn't losing my mind. Is she there right now? I glanced at Sammy, noticing tears welling up in her eyes as a solitary tear traced down her delicate face. Yes, she's with him at this moment. That's why I sought you out, she revealed. Rage surged within me, prompting me to pound my fist on the table. Heads turned in the bar, drawing attention. I signaled to the bartender, who responded with a knowing half-smile. How did he know? Do you have any idea where exactly? I inquired, hopeful for some clarity. No clue, but tomorrow I'll meet with my friend again to gather more information. I know he's married with kids, but I'm unsure of his exact whereabouts. I'll do my best to find out. It might help, she responded. I reached for her hand, gripping it tightly, and wiped a tear from her cheek. Thanks, Sammy. I know this is tough for you, but I truly appreciate it. What's your plan? She regarded me with concern. I can't act impulsively, not yet anyway. But I'll put an end to it. When I do, it'll be final with no regrets. They'll both face consequences. For now, I'll safeguard what's mine and gather evidence for my next move. Sammy eyed me anxiously as I finished my JD. Catching the bartender's eye, he poured us another round. As he approached, I sensed Sammy wanting to speak. I motioned to wait until the drinks arrived, then handed the bartender a bill. Keep the change, I said, dismissing him. How long before you confront her? I pondered. I need time to strategize. Tomorrow I'll make some calls and secure my assets. She won't get a cent from me if I have my way. It'll be tough for you to be around her, won't it? Yes, I realize that. But in a way, it's been that way for weeks now. If she hasn't noticed a change yet, she won't notice anything different. Sammy downed her drink in one gulp and rose abruptly. I have to go, Steve. Can we chat again tomorrow? I'll gather all the info I can. She donned her coat, and I stood, assisting her, sensing her proximity. Darn. She resembled her sister so much. Tears welled in her eyes as I kissed her cheek. Head home. I'll manage. I'll ring you up tomorrow. With a smile, she turned away, and I watched her depart into the dark, damp evening. Taking a deep breath, I settled back into my seat, pondering my next move. One thing was clear. They would face consequences, swift, ruthless, and unforgiving. Memories faded after that. Somehow I awoke in my own bed, mouth dry as a desert. My head still spun as I lifted myself from the bed. Rolling over, I noticed I was alone, with Claire nowhere in sight. My senses gradually returned as I heard a noise downstairs. I swung my legs off the bed and attempted to rise. Oh my God, what did I do to myself last night? I pondered. Staggering to the bathroom, I began to shake off the effects of my JD haze. Descending the stairs, pain enveloped me and my joints protested. Everything throbbed. Peering into the kitchen, I spotted her. "Hello, my love. What happened to you last night? Do you want to hear about it?" I cursed inwardly. "Just had a drink with an old friend, got carried away, that's all." I seated myself, poured some orange juice, downed it, and poured another. "Really? Who was it? Someone I know?" My mind raced. "No, I don't think so. It was Bob. Haven't seen him in ages. He was in town on business." "Bob." A flicker of recognition crossed her face when she turned around. "Yeah, probably. I mentioned him once. We were in college together, played football. He still asked about you." Claire seemed puzzled. "Sorry, don't recall any Bob, but as long as you had fun, right?" Seized the moment. She took a seat across from me. Recalling my conversation with Sammy, I looked her in the eye. "So, honey, what did you do last night? Anything interesting? When did you get back?" She met my gaze, lying effortlessly. "Oh, nothing much. Finished work, grabbed a bite and drinks. Home by 9:30. Started to worry about you, but remembered your late meeting." I knew she hadn't returned home by then because I was still there at 10 p.m. That's when I reached my limit and headed to the bar. Second strike. "I've got some things to take care of this morning, so I'll shower and hit the road. I might be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bob mentioned he'd be in touch. We've got catching up to do. If he stays a few days, you'll have to invite him over. It's nice reconnecting with old friends." "I'll make sure to do that. You must have some fond memories of him." She gazed at me with a blank expression, trying to conceal any reaction. But there was something there. I could sense it. "Maybe it'll come back to me later." "Love. Now hurry, or you'll be late. Want me to drive? You had a bit too much to drink last night." "No, I'm fine. I'll grab a taxi to pick up my car." "Thanks, though." After downing more orange juice and a couple of painkillers, I got dressed and left the house 30 minutes later while Claire was still getting ready. I had a hectic day ahead. One thing was certain, this wouldn't drag on. I gritted my teeth at the thought of Claire with Bob. My fists clenched. He'd pay, and I'd crush him. Work was chaos. Call after call to resolve line issues. My secretary handled some, but I had to attend meetings. By mid-morning, the rush eased, and I had a bit of downtime to address personal matters. Closing my office door, I delved into my finances. Within 15 minutes, I had cinched up my wallet strings and relocated some cash out of easy reach. Additionally, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to explore the option of divorce. With a few days still ahead, I figured it would afford me time to gather further intel. While it might not carry substantial weight, it could provide some leverage. Claire maintained her own bank account and credit card, so no action was necessary there. The issue lay in accessing our joint account. Yet, I swiftly closed that avenue, ensuring she couldn't access more than what remained. My personal account was safeguarded with only a nominal balance, the rest securely withdrawn. Given our childless status, any split would likely be straightforward. I privately resolved that reconciliation rested solely on Claire's confession and plea for forgiveness. Any reluctance would spell the end for us. This realization weighed heavily on me as I sat pensively at my desk, reflecting on the day's events and decisions. Did I require further insight into Bob's character and additional evidence? Or was my knowledge alone sufficient to confront them both? Interrupting my contemplation, the phone rang. "Hello? It's me, Sammy. How are you, Steve?" "Oh, caught up with things, thoughts, plans, sorting through it all. Interestingly, I've made some headway. Got more intel on this guy from a friend. His name's Bob Stones, and he's married. I've also got his address and workplace. I obtained this information discreetly. A friend who knows Claire recently spotted her with him. According to her, they're getting quite cozy. She insists that despite their efforts to conceal it, the signs are evident." "Has she witnessed them together?" I inquired. "Yes. They were at the Ramada the other evening after the seminar. They lingered after everyone else had left. She mentioned they seemed at ease with each other. Well, it's a starting point. I'm certain there are CCTV cameras there if necessary. Anyway, please provide me with his details. I need to unravel this. It's gnawing at me inside, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep it bottled up." Sammy provided her details, and in minutes, I located his social media page and obtained his photo. That's when I felt like I recognized his face. It seemed familiar, but where and when had I encountered this face before? Glancing at my watch, nearly lunchtime, I contemplated calling Claire, perhaps to arrange a meeting or simply to stir things up. My heart sank as I dialed her number. The knot in my stomach tightened as I heard her answer. "Hi, darling," she greeted, recognizing my number. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your lunch plan? Any chance we can meet up?" Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I have an appointment in 30 minutes that will take up the whole day. I was just going to grab something quick at the grocery store nearby. Everything okay? What's up with the meeting? Anything interesting? Just the usual routine with a new client. It's Mr. Stone's, I think. Her words cut through me sharply, as if she was deliberately taunting me with his name. I held my breath for a moment, trying to keep my composure. Nice. Are you around? Her voice came through the earpiece. Yes, I'm here, you damned cow. That's strike 3. Both you and Mr. Damn Stones will face consequences soon. No reprieve, no mercy. It's going to be a complete scorched earth. Yes, honey, I'm here. Sorry, I got a little lost in thought for a moment there. Anyway, I have to run, and I know you have to get ready for your meeting too. Have a good time, and I'll catch up with you later, okay? Bye. Love you. Bye. I ended the call, seething with rage, and sat there gritting my teeth when my secretary popped her head in through the door. Steve, I'm heading to the grocery store nearby. Want me to grab you anything? I pondered for a moment. Yeah, surprise me. Just make sure it's substantial, hearty, with plenty of red meat. I'm craving something to really sink my teeth into. She gave me an odd look, then nodded before closing the door. She couldn't shake the feeling that her boss was acting strangely. He'd been holed up in his office all morning, business as usual, but there was an undercurrent. Something was brewing. She just knew it. Sammy dialed her sister's office and stepped into the lobby to find her sister exiting the elevator alongside a tall, dark-haired man. He looked to be around 30, a few years older perhaps. She recognized him from his photo on the internet, Bob Stone's. Standing before her sister, who seemed taken aback, Sammy asked, "What are you doing here?" Her sister's discomfort was palpable, her plans clearly disrupted. "I just thought I'd swing by to see you and maybe grab lunch," Sammy said with an innocent smile. "Well, Mr. Stones and I have a business lunch planned, so maybe another time," her sister interjected, extending her hand to him. "Bob Stones." "Pleasure to meet you," Sammy replied. "How long have you known Claire?" Bob seemed momentarily puzzled by her question. Claire began to pull Sammy away. "Listen, Sammy, we really have to go. We have a meeting. Catch up with you later." Sammy grinned as she observed the couple exiting the premises and stepping into a waiting taxi. She caught her sister's glance as the vehicle drove off. I sat in my office, indulging in a hefty slice of pie laden with red meat, relishing each bite as I contemplated my next moves. With confirmation from Sammy that Claire had left her office, I phoned her secretary to learn she'd be out all day. Well, isn't this just peachy? Financial matters sorted, locksmith ready, lawyer primed. Tonight was meant to be the first step. I planned to toy with this couple before making a move. My old man's advice echoed in my mind. Keep it simple, be direct, obliterate them. Few words, but potent. Maybe something I'd forgotten. But it was coming back. It was imminent. That evening, I was at home when Claire walked in. She looked her usual beautiful self, nothing out of the ordinary. She smelled normal too until I went in to kiss her. The unmistakable scent of men's cologne lingered faintly. She noticed my gaze. I didn't say anything, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and headed for the door. "Where are you headed? Everything all right?" "I'm all right, just got a problem to sort out. Heading over to Jerry's. He asked me to join a poker game with some work buddies. Figured it might help clear my head. Won't be out too late." With that, I shut the door, gritted my teeth, and hopped into my car, easing down the driveway. I drove to Jerry's, parked in front of his house, and he guided me into his garage. Jerry and I go way back. He's always been a bit of a rebel and had run-ins with the law in the past. But with his combat skills, he's just the ally I need for this. You don't mess with a cage fighter. Jerry's a big guy, just over 6 feet tall and weighing about 198 pounds. All muscle. Trust me, you don't want to cross him. With a personality to match his size, he's a force to be reckoned with. But we've been close pals since school. I gave Jerry a call earlier, and he offered to assist in any way, no questions asked. Exactly the support I need. We quickly slipped into the garage, and I changed into dark overalls and a matching ski mask. We stood there like two silent performers, not uttering a word as we climbed into the inconspicuous used car he'd arranged. There was nothing remarkable about it. As we strolled slowly across town to the address Sammy provided, we remained silent. We'd planned it all out in advance, so there was no need for conversation. Jerry parked the car near Bob Stone's house. There was no activity visible except for a single light on. We waited quietly. When the front door opened, we observed him exiting, getting into his car and driving off. Jerry trailed him at a safe distance, and since we knew his destination, there was no need to rush or feel anxious. Parking at the training field was hassle-free. We remained in the car while Bob Stones retrieved his customary 50-ball bucket, a routine he apparently followed weekly. It's remarkable what you can learn online with the right search. We settled in, the radio softly playing Kenny Rogers in the background. Jerry glanced at me as the lyrics filled the air, then reached over and muted it. We sat, watching and waiting. The tension inside me was nearly unbearable. It took immense effort to remain composed and resist the urge to confront him directly. But such a move would be risky. As the parking lot gradually emptied, leaving only a couple of other cars, we both tensed when we saw him approaching his vehicle. Jerry stealthily exited the car and approached our target. Bob Stones was still recovering from his last golf swing practice. As he opened the trunk to stow his clubs, Jerry swiftly seized him and shoved him into the trunk alongside his equipment. A precise punch to the jaw rendered him silent. With Jerry's background in cage fighting, he swiftly gained the upper hand, subjecting Bob Stones to intense pain for the next 30 seconds. Satisfied with the punishment, Jerry shifted his focus to Stones' groin, delivering several blows until he cried out and lost consciousness. Jerry shut the trunk and swiftly returned to the car, where I calmly drove us out of the parking lot without attracting attention. "Everything went smoothly," Jerry remarked, removing his gloves and mask. "Thanks, Jerry. I owe you big time," I acknowledged gratefully. "No worries, buddy. Anytime. I'll always have your back, and there's no way to repay what you've done for me," Jerry replied. "That's what friends are for. At least your hands are intact, and there were no security cameras in the parking lot. So, all in all, a job well done. Let's head back and kick off this card game. The others should already be there." We returned and indulged in a friendly game of poker for the next 4 hours, just for amusement, with no high stakes involved. Being friends, we understood the unspoken rule. Friends don't take advantage of each other. The atmosphere was pleasant. Everyone was aware of the situation and offered their support throughout, which bolstered my confidence about what I knew I would soon have to confront Claire about. But before that, I planned to toy with her. I stumbled through the door a little past 1 a.m., exaggerating how much I had drunk. Jerry arranged for one of the guys to drive my car back. Claire was awake and waiting. It was time for a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Darling, why are you still up? I mentioned I might be late. Are you all right?" She scrutinized me closely. Jerry and the guys just dropped me off in my car. Concerned that I might have overindulged in JD again, I flung my jacket toward the coat rack and missed by a mile. Collapsing onto the sofa, I gazed at her. Claire sat with her arms folded, wearing a disgusted expression. I met her gaze with wide eyes and a blank expression. "What?" she snorted, clearly itching to say something. "Go ahead, spill it. What's wrong, Steve? Is there someone else or something else? You've been acting strangely lately." I chuckled, suppressing the rising anger. "All in good time, Claire. Take a chill pill. I'm fine, my dear. It's just been a rough patch lately. It'll all be over soon." Claire studied me, my words echoing in her mind. She seemed uncertain, but there was definitely something brewing. We retired to bed. I pretended to drift off, apparently falling asleep almost instantly. This irritated her, fueling her readiness to confront me. But I remained passive. The following morning, Claire rose early to prepare coffee while I stumbled down the stairs, feigning a hangover. I stumbled into the kitchen. "Good morning, darling. How are you?" "Thank goodness I'm feeling better now. Do you have anything for this headache?" She tossed some pain relievers my way as I sipped my coffee. She appeared composed. I noticed her phone on the kitchen table and wondered if someone had called her. Claire caught my gaze on her phone, and I sensed her urge to grab it, but doing so would have seemed odd. Pouring myself more orange juice, I casually picked up the phone and saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. So she got the message somehow. I quickly glanced at it before sliding it back to her. "Needs charging, sweetheart. Wouldn't want to miss any messages due to a dead battery." I exited the kitchen to get dressed. Claire watched me, sensing that something was amiss, and Bob hadn't texted her this morning, as he had been doing for the past few weeks. But he couldn't know, could he? She dismissed the thought. She hadn't been that careless, and it had only been a brief fling. There were a few lunches, dinners, a couple of outings, and, of course, 3 hotel stays. Not that she was counting. It was just safe fun, she rationalized. And Steve would never find out, would he? This thought made her pause. When was the last time she and her husband had been carnal? She couldn't recall. Perhaps that's just how it was. She needed to address it promptly. She had become so consumed by Bob that she overlooked what was right in front of her, the one thing that could raise Steve's suspicions. I hurried down the stairs and dashed out the door, evading Claire's attempt at a deeper kiss. Waving and smiling, I drove off around 11 a.m. for work. Feeling playful, I decided to text Claire. "Apologies for today, my dear. I've got a lot on my mind, but it'll sort out soon. Love you. X." I reclined in my chair, waiting for a reaction. Shortly after lunch, Sammy rang me up. "Steve, what's the deal?" "What's up, Sammy? Bob Stones was discovered smacked in his car trunk by a golf club worker today. Claire mentioned it. She's pretty shaken." I reassured her these things happen sometimes nowadays, especially when it's someone we know, but we shouldn't dwell on it too much. "You weren't involved, were you?" "Wow, was he seriously injured?" "I can't say it's a loss, but no, I had no part in it. He's just a bit roughed up. Heard he has some cuts and bruises, but nothing serious." "Did you find out how she found out?" "Yeah. She had a meeting scheduled with him today, and his company called to say he was in the hospital. His wife made the call. Seems sweet. Believable, but convenient. Maybe they won't have it so easy next time." "What do you mean, Steve? Accidents happen in strange places." That night, Claire wasn't home. Her car was gone, and there was no note. I dialed her phone. "Where are you, honey?" I asked cheerily. "Oh, I'm at the hospital visiting a friend. I'll be home soon. I'm on my way." "All right. Hope your friend improves. Anyway, see you soon, love. Love you. Bye." I hung up before she could reply. 30 minutes later, she returned, looking worn out. "How's your friend? Hope it's nothing serious and she gets discharged soon." Claire seemed about to speak, then changed her mind. "Oh, yeah, it's not too serious. She just took a fall and got some nasty bruises. We'll be back home in a few days. This coffee is good." "Yes, thank you," Claire replied, taking a sip. "The other night, one of my company's representatives was attacked," she mentioned, leaving the statement hanging for a reaction. "Oh, God. Really? What happened? Was he smacked and left in his car overnight?" "Yes, unfortunately. Bob wasn't severely injured. It seems like they just wanted to thrash him up for no reason. Nothing was stolen." "Strike 4. This is the same Bob you claim not to know. Cow," I muttered to myself. Claire noticed my gaze and realized her mistake. She quickly tried to cover it up, but it was too late. Now she knew I knew. Hurriedly, she made her way to the exit to change clothes. I suspected she might receive a phone call any second, but from whom? I realized I needed to reassess my plan as things were progressing rapidly. Calling out to Claire as she ascended the stairs, I informed her that I needed to step out for a while to handle something, assuring her not to worry and that I wouldn't be gone long. I drove to Bob Stone's home address and knocked on the door. It opened to reveal a petite, dark-haired woman standing before me. "Mrs. Stones, you don't know me, but I need to discuss something delicate with you. Can I step inside for a moment?" She regarded me with a mix of nerves, curiosity, and caution. "I'm Steve Ryland. My wife, Claire Ryland, is having an affair with your husband." I paused as a blend of realization and horror flickered across her face. Stepping back, she motioned for me to enter, leading me to the living room. "I assume this concerns both of them," she said, pain evident in her eyes. "Yes, unfortunately. They've been having an affair, and I only discovered it a few days ago. I'm sorry to have to bring this to your attention. I also know that he's currently in the hospital." Her demeanor seemed to collapse inward, tears streaming down her face for several moments. "I suspected as much. I knew he was at it again," she spat. "I'm filing for divorce from Claire. She's had ample chances to come clean, and I can't tolerate her deceit any longer. I'm not certain how long this has been going on, but the fact that she betrayed me is enough. I can't forgive or forget." "Does this relate to the thrashing he endured last night?" I met her imploring gaze and swiftly made my decision. "I can't say. I had no hand in it whatsoever. The whole thing caught me off guard, leaving me just as stunned. Whoever did it, I can't say I'm upset about it. Sorry, but that's how I feel. Could he also be involved with someone else's wife? Nothing would surprise me." "Well, he can stay far away from my doorstep. I've had my fill of this. That's why we're back here, because he cheated." I left her still seething after providing her with the contact information for my locksmith and lawyer. Dear, oh my God, what a mess. I hopped into my car and made my way to the hospital, which was just 10 minutes away. I arrived even quicker. Passing through the lobby, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, almost allowing a smile to break through. Squeezing into the elevator, I ascended to the 4th floor where a certain Mr. Bob Stones resided. Consulting the patient directory, I located his room in a side wing. Slipping past the nurse's station without notice, I entered his room and quietly closed the door behind me. Upon entering, he gave me a puzzled look. Approaching his bed, I examined his bandaged face. One eye was shut, the other bloodshot. He strained to focus. "Jerry did a commendable job," I mused, scrutinizing him. "You seem to be having trouble recognizing me." "Bob, take a moment to think. I'll wait," I said, grinning as he cast me a bewildered glance. I settled on the edge of his bed. Peering through his facial bandages, I noticed a severely bruised eye and suspected issues with his jaw. "It's inconsequential." Surveying the elevated bedding supporting his lower body, I winced. "This looks awful. You must be in pain, right?" Swiftly snatching the emergency button from him and tossing it beneath the bed, I playfully jabbed his ribs, prompting a squeal. "Still pondering my identity, Bob? Need a hint?" His face retained its mix of confusion and curiosity. "Let's see. Reflect on the married women you've been involved with and the marriages you've disrupted. Does that jog your memory?" His eyes met mine, revealing a mind working overtime to piece things together. Another moment elapsed as I savored his evident distress and uncertainty. "Need a nudge, Bob? Think about it. I'm tied to a woman named Claire. Does that jog your memory?" Recognition sparked in his eyes. "Got it now?" I grinned, fierce as a pre-dinner tiger. He nodded in understanding. "Great. Glad we've cleared that up. So, wondering about my presence here? Let's get to it. I'm here bearing a message from your wife." Pausing for comprehension, I mimicked a throat clearing, noting his impaired speech. "She wants you to hear this. Here's the gist. Stay away. Don't show up. Divorce papers are coming your way. And just so you know, you're truly contemptible." A tear welled in his visible eye. Chuckling, I observed his restricted movement and leaned in to meet his gaze. "I'm ending my marriage because my wife found pleasure with someone like you. This is just your starting point. We'll encounter each other again, guaranteed. I'll disrupt your life as you've disrupted mine. I won't relent. So be prepared to run. By the way, I'm not responsible for this to you. Just a heads up." I wanted to keep him guessing. Raising my fist, I struck his exposed eye. I heard a crunch. Not a big deal. Then a sudden hit to my groin. He yelled and then blacked out. I stood up and exited the room. Was I content? Far from it. But it was a beginning. He'd lie there, realizing his error, unable to act. My departure was unnoticed. Had anyone seen, they'd have noticed my wide smile. I drove home cautiously, gearing up to address my other issue. My anger was contained. Once retaliation started, it was a path I'd eagerly pursue. While the end of my marriage deeply saddened me, her betrayal left no chance of reconciliation. My only solace? Those who wronged me would soon experience even greater pain. I don't easily forgive. Bob Stone's card hinted at a future encounter. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed Claire's car exactly where she'd parked it just 2 hours prior. Absent-mindedly, I tapped its hood as I headed to my front door, contemplating this might be my final entry as a married man. A leaden feeling consumed my heart upon entering. The accumulated anxieties of recent days felt tangible, pressing down as I made my way to the living room. Approaching the door, I caught the faint sound of the TV. I paused, fixing my gaze on her. Claire was seated on the sofa, exuding palpable fear and apprehension, as though expecting imminent repercussions. She seemed to sense the culmination of our charade, though no words had been spoken. Her hands quivered as she tried to maintain composure, while I stood observing. Lifting her eyes, fear was unmistakably present. Her lips moved, attempting to speak, but no words emerged. I entered, passed by her to pour myself a JD over ice, and set the glass on the table between us before sitting. Meeting her gaze, I detected her fear, coupled with a hint of defiance. Silently, I reached for my drink and savored a slow sip. Feeling its warmth as it went down, my eyes locked onto hers without wavering. She waited. Let her wait, I mused, taking another deliberate sip, maintaining my silence. My face remained impassive as I observed the woman I once deeply loved staring back at me. Though my heart still harbored strong emotions for her, they were now tempered by the pain she'd inflicted without cause. It was time for her to understand my anguish. While I gazed at her, she found no hint of optimism in my expression. We had said so much already. Wordlessly, Claire seemed to gather herself, standing taller as if choosing bravery. Unaware of my knowledge and unable to bear the weight of my silent accusation, she broke the silence. "Where did you go?" Her eyes revealed her anxiety while I remained motionless and quiet. "Speak to me," she pleaded. I leisurely took another sip of my JD. "Nothing like JD after a hectic day," I mused, noting her growing distress. "What's bothering you, Steve?" she snapped, frustrated by my silent response. "Fine, Claire. I'll share my whereabouts if you disclose yours. Deal?" Her eyes met mine, cautious and wary, each of us sizing the other up like wary boxers, uncertain of who'd strike first and wary of the counterpunch. I mentioned being at the hospital visiting a friend. "What's your point?" She reclined in her chair, arms folded, satisfied with her initial response. I leisurely took another sip of my JD. "Darling, I anticipated that response. Care to reconsider?" Her composed facade wavered, fear evident in her eyes. She was becoming anxious. I had indeed been with my friend, just as I'd stated. "Claire, what's causing the confusion? I'll clarify. I was visiting a friend," I began. "Though our relationship is recent, we're growing closer." I scrutinized her reaction closely. Despite her efforts to remain poised, the defiant tilt of her chin betrayed her. "Did I discuss her husband, Bob Stones? Does that name ring a bell?" I hinted. A change in her demeanor was clear. It seemed her husband had an accident and was hospitalized. Though not severe, he had suffered significant bruises. "He's recovering well, which is a relief, isn't it?" I teased, watching Claire's face redden, sensing her apprehension. "So, what was your conversation with Mrs. Stones about?" she inquired, both eager and fearful to know. From what I gathered, her husband appears to be a consistent womanizer or cheater. Upon discovering his infidelity, I believe she deserved to be informed. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, feeling a constriction in her throat akin to a noose tightening. "Are you all right? Can I get you a drink? Do you know about Bob Stone's indiscretions?" I took a sip of my drink as she struggled to respond, her words failing her. "Let me assist you," I said, looking deeply into her eyes, hoping she'd sense my sincerity. "I'm aware now." Her eyes widened and she covered her mouth in shock. Observing her face, I saw a mix of disbelief and surprise. Despite seeking some support, my expression remained impassive. "I'm aware of your involvement with Bobby, darling. I've known for some time. Not an eternity, but enough. So, if you have something to confess, now's the time, before you leave." Downing my drink, I rose to refill it. "You sure you don't want one?" I asked, maintaining composure under the circumstances. She nodded, and I poured us both generous drinks, returning to sit across from her. Claire took a long sip before speaking. "It was meaningless, just physical. It meant nothing." "Really? It meant absolutely nothing? Remember our vows?" Her mention of the common "it was just love-making" excuse ignited anger within me. "It was a fleeting moment, Steve. It just happened." "Seriously? Just happened? Such things don't just occur spontaneously. It requires two consenting adults, planning, and agreement. Don't belittle me. You and Bobby have been deceiving me for weeks, maybe even months, but it ends now. Both of you can go to hell." It only happened twice, and honestly, it wasn't that enjoyable. The idea was enticing, but the act itself was overshadowed by my constant fear of you discovering it. "Well, I've finally uncovered your deceit. I hope jeopardizing our marriage was worth it. Steve, I am genuinely sorry. It was meaningless, and we can work through this. I'll make things right and follow whatever you decide." A sudden, almost manic laugh escaped my lips, causing her to look at me with a realization that this situation was grave. "It was an error, but we can mend it. I regret it deeply." "Sure, you regret being caught. Would you have stopped if you hadn't been discovered?" "I doubt it." All the usual excuses pour out so effortlessly from someone unfaithful. Your lies, ever since this began, are just as fluent. You may believe them, but I certainly won't. Honestly, the woman I once loved and married seems lost. I don't even recognize you anymore. My words seemed to cut through her pretense, and she realized the gravity of our situation. "What should I do, Steve? I'll do anything. Is it over between us?" While I was away, I reached out to Sammy. She's aware of everything too. She'll be here shortly to pick you up. "But where will I go? Are you throwing me out?" Her shock became evident as she processed the situation. "You're free to go wherever, you deceitful person. Maybe back to the hospital to see your other man. I don't give a damn. What matters is that you leave. We're finished." I took the last sip of my drink and set the glass down with a firm thud, signaling the conversation's end. Claire stared at me, shocked, when a knock interrupted us. Rising, I greeted Sammy at the door. "How did everything go?" she asked as we returned to the living room, observing her sister, who was now crying uncontrollably. her shoulders heaving. Just get her out of here, Sammy. I hate to be so direct, but if she stays, I'm concerned about what I might do. Despite her betrayal, I still have feelings for her. Please, make it quick. Thanks for handling this, Sammy, and I'll touch base soon. I poured myself another drink as Sammy efficiently packed Claire's belongings. Over the next few days, I heard my wife's cries while watching her sister pack and stuff her things into a few suitcases. Removing her from my home took less than 10 minutes. The true challenge lay ahead. Removing her from my life entirely and healing. Retribution would aid in this journey. That's what I awaited now, along with another stiff drink. I gazed at the flames of the bonfire I'd lit in the backyard, consuming all of Claire's belongings. She had no place in my home anymore. Damn you, I muttered, finishing the bottle and tossing it into the fire.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Hey there, I'm Maria. My coworker Amy tells me for the 100th time today, "You're glowing." It's not because of the typical engagement excitement that people expect. No, my smile is for something else. Alex left a sticky note in my lunchbox with a hilariously bad stick figure drawing of us. He labeled his figure "still can't draw," and mine is "still says yes." That's what I love about us. We never follow the expected path. Take our first date, for example. Instead of the usual dinner and a movie, we ended up helping his elderly neighbor chase down her runaway pet rabbit in the rain. By the time we caught Mr. Whiskers, who, ironically, was not a cat, we were drenched, muddy, and laughing so hard we could barely breathe. The past 3 years with Alex have been full of these wonderfully quirky moments. Like the time we tried making homemade pasta and ended up with flour in places I'm still finding, or when he tried to teach me basketball, and I accidentally hit him in the face with the ball, twice. He now wears protective goggles whenever we play, looking like a dorky mad scientist. Our engagement story isn't TikTok famous. There were no flash mobs, elaborate scavenger hunts, or skywriting. Instead, Alex proposed while we were building a blanket fort during a power outage. We'd been telling ghost stories by candlelight when, right in the middle of my overly dramatic ghost impression, he pulled out the ring and said, "I want all my power outages to be with you." People keep asking me about wedding plans and color schemes, but I'm too busy enjoying moments like Alex geeking out about space facts while we grocery shop or do laundry. "Did you know astronauts can't cry in space because tears don't fall?" he'll say, his eyes lighting up like a child sharing a secret. Sometimes, I catch him watching me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, and it makes me smile even more. Like when I'm trying to solve the Sunday crossword puzzle or dancing to 80s music while loading the dishwasher. Alex has this look that makes me feel like the most captivating person in the world, even if I've just spent 10 minutes ranting about how someone ate my clearly labeled yogurt from the office fridge. The ring feels different from what I expected, not in its appearance, which is beautiful, a vintage piece that belonged to his grandmother, but in what it symbolizes. It's not just about the future we're planning. It's about celebrating what we already share. This comfortable, quirky love feels like coming home after a long day and finding your favorite meal waiting, even though you never mentioned you were craving it. Last night, we sat on our tiny balcony, sharing leftover Chinese food straight from the containers. Alex was wearing his "This Is My Fancy Shirt" t-shirt, and we mapped out our future, guided by fortune cookie predictions. According to those cookies, we'll have 3 daughters, live in a house with a purple door, and become surprisingly good at origami. Watching him then, laughing so hard at his own bad jokes that he nearly choked on lo mein, I felt an undeniable certainty. Not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind. The kind that comes from knowing someone's flaws and strange habits and still thinking they're absolutely perfect for you. Now let's check the story from Alex's side. It's been 2 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days, not that I'm counting, since I last saw that name appear on her phone. I still remember sitting in our favorite coffee shop, my hands curled around a cooling cup of coffee, as she looked me in the eye and promised, really promised, that she understood why her friendship with James made me uncomfortable. There was something different about that conversation. Maybe it was the way she reached across the table, took my phone, and showed me as she removed him from her social media. "I choose us," she said. The ring had been burning a hole in my sock drawer for months before that day. I picked it out last summer, but every time I thought about proposing, something would happen. A casual mention of meeting James for coffee, a text notification I'd catch a glimpse of, or those group hangouts where he'd always somehow be present. Each time, the ring stayed hidden, and my doubts grew louder. It's funny how much lighter everything feels now. Last weekend, We were at her cousin's wedding, and for the first time, I wasn't spending the evening wondering if she was secretly messaging him during the quiet moments. Instead, I watched her dance, terribly, with reckless abandon. Because when Beyoncé comes on, she doesn't care who's watching. And all I could think was, this is it. This is our time. The proposal didn't go exactly as I had planned. I had everything arranged, dinner reservations at that fancy restaurant overlooking the city, a violinist on standby, the works. But that morning, seeing her in her old college sweatshirt, struggling to make French toast and getting more batter on herself than in the pan, I couldn't wait. The ring was upstairs, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was running to get it. She said yes before I could even finish asking. We were so caught up calling our families that the French toast ended up burning, but not even the smell of charred breakfast could ruin that moment. We ended up at our local diner for breakfast, still in our pajamas, looking like a mess and grinning like fools. Looking back, I realize how close I came to letting my fears cloud what we have. Those long conversations about boundaries with exes, and the arguments that started with, he's just a friend, and ended with slammed doors, they feel distant now. Not forgotten, but like obstacles we had to overcome to reach this place. Now, when her phone buzzes, she reads her messages out loud without me needing to ask. Usually about work drama or her mom's latest cooking disaster. There's an ease in how she shares her life with me now. No hidden corners or careful omissions. Just last week, she even turned down an invitation to a mutual friend's party because she knew James would be there. She didn't make a big deal out of it, just said, "Not our scene, babe. Let's do movie night instead." Sometimes, I still catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Old habits are hard to break. But then Maria will do something like leave sticky notes with terrible puns in my lunchbox, or send me a random text about how she can't wait to argue with me over wallpaper patterns when we buy our own place, and I remember. This is what trust feels like. This is what we fought for. The ring looks perfect on her finger, catching the light just right. But what's even more perfect is the way she absent-mindedly twists it while reading, just as she used to fidget with her hair. It's become part of her, just like she's become part of me. For the first time in our relationship, I'm not scanning for shadows in the corners. I'm looking forward. Now let's check Maria's side of the story. I've been staring at my phone for 20 minutes, debating whether to respond to James's text congratulating me on the engagement. It shouldn't be this complicated. He's just James, the same James who helped me move into my first apartment, taught me to drive stick shift in his beat-up Volkswagen, and supported me through my dad's passing 3 years ago. We dated for only 2 months in college before realizing we were better as friends. That was 7 years ago, and since then, he's become more like a brother than an ex. We were part of the same pre-med study group, both realizing we hated organic chemistry and switching majors together. James to business and me to marketing. It's funny how some people just stick around through all of life's plot twists. Alex doesn't see it that way. To him, James is an ex-boyfriend, while I see the friend who brought me soup during finals week, helped me build my IKEA furniture, even if he did put my bookshelf together backwards, and introduced me to his girlfriend, Sarah, last year. How threatening can someone be when they're the reason you have an embarrassing nickname from a botched attempt at dyeing your hair purple that turned out green? Maybe I should have set clearer boundaries with Alex from the beginning. But how do you explain a friendship that's survived 3 apartments, 2 career changes, and countless bad dates? James was there through my disastrous relationship with Mike, my quarter-life crisis when I almost moved to Seattle, and that phase where I thought I could become a professional baker. He still teases me about my rock-hard cookies. I understand why Alex feels uneasy. If the roles were reversed, I'd probably feel the same. But cutting James out completely feels like erasing a whole chapter of my life. It's not just losing a friend. It's acting as if those shared memories and inside jokes don't matter. Like the time we got so lost hiking we ended up in the wrong state, or our rainy Sunday tradition of watching terrible sci-fi movies. The engagement ring glimmers as I type and erase yet another reply to his text. I promised Alex I'd keep my distance, and I have. No more casual coffee meetups. No more group game nights where James would always play the banker in Monopoly and cheat, as if it were an inside joke only we shared. I've kept my word. But ghosting someone who has been there for every significant chapter of my adult life feels like I'm erasing a part of myself. Just last week, Sarah posted photos of their long-awaited trip to Japan, the one James had been planning since college. He's finally doing it, ticking off the dreams we once shared during late-night study marathons. I wanted so badly to text him, to tease him about the ridiculous tourist shirt he wore in one photo, exactly the kind we used to joke we'd buy ironically. Instead, I just liked the post and closed Instagram, a quiet act of restraint. Alex has been so happy lately. Seeing him relaxed and confident in us means everything to me. Still, there's this persistent voice in my head asking, shouldn't love be secure enough to survive old friendships? James wasn't just part of my past relationships. He was part of my journey of figuring out who I am, beyond just who I'm with. He knows all my clumsy attempts at adulthood, my awkward stories, my worries about turning into my mother. I read the text again. Congrats, Nance. Alex is a lucky guy. Hope you're happy. Simple, friendly, exactly what you'd expect from an old friend. After another minute, I set my phone down without replying. Sometimes, maintaining peace means letting certain bridges fade into the background, even if those very connections shaped the path that brought you to where you are now. Now let's check the story from Alex's side. It's just a birthday party, Alex. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? I look at Maria across the kitchen island, her hands cradling a coffee mug, one she got from James back in college. Even now, traces of him linger in these subtle ways. The anger building inside me isn't a sudden flame but a cold, deep-seated certainty. Let me be very clear, I say, keeping my voice controlled. Every guy who claims to be just a friend is often waiting for his chance. I've seen it before, countless times. I've watched those so-called friends comfort someone after a breakup, only to make their move weeks later. Maria opens her mouth to object, but I raise my hand to stop her. Do you know why James didn't invite me to his party? Because in his mind, I'm just temporary, the current boyfriend, or rather, fiancé, standing in his way. He's stayed close for 7 years, Maria. 7 years of being your emotional safety net. The ring on her finger catches the light, and a bitter taste rises in my throat. When I proposed, it wasn't just about that moment, or even just about love. I proposed because you finally understood this boundary, and you promised me. You looked me in the eye and said you understood why your friendship with him crossed a line. She sets down her mug so forcefully that coffee splashes over the rim. That's not fair, she says, her voice tight. James has a girlfriend. He's always been supportive of our relationship. A hollow laugh escapes me, without a trace of humor. Of course he has. That's part of the playbook, Maria. Be the supportive friend, the confidant, the guy who just gets you. But think about it. Why does he need to text you at midnight with random thoughts? Why do your catch-ups have to be just the two of you? Why can't his girlfriend or I be there? Silence stretches between us, broken only by the faint sound of a car alarm outside, which quickly fades. I take a deep breath and continue, my voice softer now. I've seen this dynamic too many times. Genuine platonic friendships between men and women are already rare, but between exes, they're almost impossible. One person almost always holds onto feelings, waiting for an opportunity. More often than not, it's the guy, because we're wired that way. We leave the door open, even if it's just a crack. Maria's face flushes with anger. So what? You're saying men and women can't be friends? That's outdated and sexist. No, I reply, holding her gaze. I'm saying that from the beginning, I've been honest about this boundary. I'm saying that I proposed to you after you understood and respected that boundary. And now, you're not asking, but telling me that you're going to his birthday party. A party where there will be drinking, dancing, and reminiscing about old times. I walk to the window, needing some distance. You know what hurts the most? It's not even about James anymore. It's about respect. Respect for my feelings, respect for our relationship, respect for the promises you made when you accepted this ring. You agreed that some things would have to change. Turning back to her, I say, I'm not trying to control you, Maria. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I can and cannot accept in our marriage. I can't accept you maintaining an intimate friendship with someone who's seen you naked. The silence that follows is heavy, laden with everything we've built together and everything we stand to lose. When I speak again, my voice is quiet but resolute. So no, it's not just a birthday party. It's a choice. If you go, you're choosing to disregard everything I've said, everything you promised, and everything this ring represents. I start toward our bedroom but pause at the doorway. You know what the saddest part is? James knows exactly what he's doing. He's testing how much influence he still has over you. And right now, you're showing him that it's more than your fiancé does. Now let's check the story from Maria's side. As I settle onto the couch, it feels foreign beneath me, every cushion a reminder that this isn't where I'm meant to be sleeping. My engagement ring feels heavy on my finger as I scroll through the photos from James's party. Each image feels like evidence of my wrongdoing. Me laughing with old friends, blowing out candles on James's cake, group shots where everyone is raising their glasses. I thought coming home late would mean Alex would be asleep and that we could deal with this in the morning. Instead, he was sitting in the dark living room, waiting for me. Had fun? His voice was flat when I walked in. No anger, which somehow made it worse. He didn't even look at my attempted smile or respond when I leaned in to kiss him. Instead, he pointed to the couch and walked to our bedroom. Our bedroom. The door shut behind him, and it might as well have been a wall. Morning light creeps through the blinds, and I hear Alex in the kitchen. My heart leaps. Maybe he's cooled down. Maybe we can talk this out. I practiced my explanation again. It was just a party. Nothing happened. I barely even talked to James. But when I enter the kitchen, Alex's expression stops me cold. He extends his hand, the ring glinting in the light, but he doesn't look up from his coffee. 2 words, he says, and suddenly I can't breathe. Alex, please. It was stupid. I know, but Maria, his voice cracks slightly. I need you to understand something. This isn't about the party. This is about trust, about respect, about choices and consequences. You tried pushing the boundary again. You defied me and broke your promise. I start crying, the kind of ugly sobbing where I can't catch my breath. I'll cut him off completely. I'll block his number. I'll stop. Alex finally looks at me, and I wish he hadn't. His eyes are red-rimmed but dry. You've made those promises before, but last night proved something to me. You'll always choose the possibility of keeping him in your life over the certainty of keeping me in it. That's not true. I shout, but even as the words leave my mouth, I know they're a lie. Every boundary I agreed to, I found a way around. Every promise I made, I've bent. And for what? For someone who, as Alex points out, didn't even have the decency to invite my fiancée to his party. Alex stands, pushing his untouched coffee away. I called Rachel. She'll be here in an hour to help you pack. Pack? The word feels foreign. None of this makes sense. Just 24 hours ago, I was planning a wedding. You have until tomorrow evening to get your things. Anything left, I'll have shipped to your mom's. His voice is gentle, but the finality in it cuts deep. I've already called the wedding venue to cancel. I grab his arm as he passes. 3 years, Alex? Are you really throwing away 3 years? He carefully removes my hand. No, Maria. You threw it away. One decision at a time. One broken promise at a time. Last night was just the final one. The next few hours blur together. Rachel arrives, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze as she helps pack my life into boxes. Alex stays in his home office, the door closed. I keep waiting for him to burst out, to yell, to give me one more chance to explain, but he doesn't. The silence is absolute. It's only when I'm in Rachel's car that my phone buzzes. It's James. Hope you're okay. Alex seems really out of line here. Want to grab coffee and talk about it? I stare at the message, and suddenly Alex's words from all those arguments echo in my head. About guys waiting in the wings. About the impossibility of true platonic friendship with an ex. I turn off my phone and lean my head against the window, watching our apartment building. His apartment building now. Disappear in the side mirror. The ring sits in a small box on what used to be our kitchen counter. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My wife cheated on me after I broke 2 bones and said she wasn't sorry, so I made sure she was. Hey guys, I, 40 male, have been married to my Christine, 39 female, for about 10 years now, and we have 1 child, my lovely daughter who is 9 years old. Like any marriage, we've had her ups and downs. A lot of downs, to be honest, but we come through everything fine. There's been no infidelity, but there has been a basis for trust issues. On both our parts, I will admit. However, in the last 2 years or so, I've done my best as a husband, and I think I've maintained a good record. My wife and I have a good life in the bedroom. We're getting older, but things haven't dropped off too significantly from back when we met. I've always been very thankful for that much, because I have been involved with women who might as well have been celibate, and it was frustrating to say the least, because no amount of communication fixed anything. So a woman who actually wants to roll around in bed is a blessing to me. I owned a business before I met my wife, and when we got married, she eventually joined me at the helm to run things. About 2 weeks ago, I got into an accident on my way to work. I got T-boned at a red light, and woke up in the hospital with a broken femur and humerus. Yeah, needless to say, that wasn't fun. Once it was certain there wasn't any internal damage, I was let home in 2 days, with a cast on my arm and my leg. Obviously my movement was impaired quite a lot, but I was able to find my way around the house with a lot of stumbling and leaning on things. Of course, there were certain things I was unable to do, and Christine had to help me with them. For about the first week, she seemed to be fine with it, and every time I asked her if it wasn't too much of a burden, she'd say no with a big smile. However, once I crossed over into the second week, I started to notice a bit of change in her attitude. To be honest, when I said our life in the bedroom is good, it's really good, and we usually don't go a full week without anything going on. So my first assumption was that it might have been because of that, especially because I was starting to feel my body craving it too. Again, when I asked her if I was being a burden, she said no. But this time she seemed more short with me. I asked her straight up whether it was because of the lack of action between us, but she said it wasn't and left the room promptly after that. At that moment, I really felt it was, but I felt like being married as long as we were, she'd be able to answer me truthfully with a question like that. My mouth and one of my hands still work, so I feel like we'd be able to work things out. I mean, I had the urge to ask her to help me blow a load, but she's already doing a lot for me, so I decided not to bother, at least until I can't take it anymore. Now here's the thing. Yesterday, she came back home after managing the business on my behalf that day, and she was very clearly in a much better mood than she was all the other days, like I could describe her mood as bubbly. Now, I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but since I feel like her mood before was because we couldn't be intimate, I'm suddenly overthinking whether she was able to get somebody else to take care of that side of things for her. I mean, she's never cheated on me. Does anyone ever know for sure? And apart from that sudden change in her mood, I wouldn't have anything else to use to suspect her. But she could have had a massage or heard some good news. But talking to her, there didn't seem to be any obvious reason for her sudden happiness. So, before I do anything rash, not like I can with the way I am right now, I want to hear all of your opinions. Should I try and do some digging, or should I just assume that she was just happy for some other reason? I mean, I feel like I might be jumping to conclusions after such a long time knowing each other, but let me know what you all think, please. Update 1. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 weeks since my last post, but I'm back with an update. A lot of you said I should go ahead and check her phone. Partners should be allowed to check each other's phones if they have nothing to hide. I know she can check mine as much as she wants because I've never had anything to hide. Well, I eventually did check and boy, did I find things. Anyway, I wasn't about to ask her to hand it over because that would give her the chance to delete any evidence. I had to gain access to it at a time when I would have enough time to search all through things and potentially save any proof I found. Just so you know, after that day when she was all happy, she slowly went back into a mood and then just another day was all bubbly again. It was the third time that she came back all happy that I got my chance. She was chewing gum, but I was sure I could smell a slight scent of booze following her. She also didn't kiss me as she got back home, but she was happy. I think it might have been whatever she drank, but it didn't take long for her to fall asleep and she left her phone right beside her in bed. I never checked Catherine's phone before, but I was very anxious as I did it because I was scared she could wake up at any moment and I'd have to start trying to explain myself. But the anxiety from not knowing whether she was cheating on me was honestly a lot worse, so I pushed through. There were no photos or videos of her with anyone unusual, but it was when I went to her messaging app that I saw an unread message from an Alex, and squinting at the profile picture, I saw it was the same Alex I knew that worked for me. The thing is, this normally wouldn't have been an issue since she was manning the workspace at the moment, but the message was, "Gotten home" with a kiss emoji at the end. I opened the message immediately, despite the last one being on read, and I went through everything up until the point where I had the accident. Things were very formal until about a day before the day that my wife had come home all bubbly the first time. She had started flirting with her heavily, and she returned the energy. He must have gotten some kind of green light at work that day to come on strong, and so it just made it clear how little I knew while I was at home recovering. I noticed that on the 3 occasions that my wife had come back in a brighter mood, Alex always asked her if she had gotten home, but he never did that on other days. Between those days, there was some flirting here and there, but nothing extreme, though it might as well have been. I took several pictures with my phone and put her phone back. This was about 2 days ago, and I really don't know what to do. She didn't seem any different the next day, so I don't think she suspected I touched her phone, probably because she was tipsy, but I really don't know what to do. I have all the evidence I need to come to a very solid conclusion that my wife has cheated on me with my employee at least 3 times. But how do I proceed from here in a way that actually makes sense? Do I just say divorce and figure everything out from here? The thing is, I feel so hurt. We haven't had a super rosy marriage, but for the most part, it has been good. I've never seen a fear of mine, but after I have an accident, that's when she decides to cheat on me. I've struggled to act normal around her, but I really don't know if I can take it any longer. I need this to end, but I can't let it just end with a divorce. I need more than that. I need to feel satisfied. Please, I've been trying to think of things I can do, but my mind is failing to put 2 thoughts together. I'll be waiting to hear what advice you all may have for me. Update 2. Wow, time flies. It's been a long time since my last update, but after posting it, I think I must have read through every single comment there. Thank you to everyone for all the kind words and suggestions, and I have to say, they certainly contributed to my approach. The first thing I did was to find a divorce lawyer. I didn't pay a routine right that time, but just wanted to know what I could do about his services. At that point, I stupidly still felt like there could be an explanation for what I had read on her phone, so I decided to confront her before making anything final. It was a bit easier for me to move around on my own, so I told her that I wanted to follow her to work to see how things were going and say hi to the employees. She tried to weakly convince me to just stay at home and that she had everything under control. But at that point, I knew nothing was going to stop me from going. So about an hour later, I was in the passenger seat and we were heading to our business location. Most of the guys were super happy to see me, Alex included, though he seemed a lot more awkward than the rest of them. My wife also didn't seem to be super happy that I was there. Towards the end of the workday, I called for Alex to come into my office, and I did that when my wife was somewhere close by. I noticed her freeze up as I did that, and she actually followed Alex into my office, which she normally wouldn't do if it was anyone else, but I didn't tell her to leave. Most of them seemed shifty, though I might have been imagining it. I only asked Alex something about a client we had been dealing with before the accident happened, and I could actually see the fear disappear from his body as he realized I was just asking about something relatively trivial. Once the day ended, I headed back home with my wife and she was slightly talkative, maybe because she realized, or at least assumed, that she hadn't been found out. I felt like I had more than enough suspicion at that point to be very direct with her, and I decided that I would do it the next day when she returned from work. That's fortunate for me. The next day was another one of those days where her mood seemed to be better than usual, which triggered me because it made me assume she had just been intimate with my employee just minutes before. She was probably made bolder because she felt she had confirmation that I didn't suspect it one bit, but that was just part of what gave me the courage to confront her minutes after she walked in. I asked her to sit across from me, and I asked her to straight up, "Are you cheating on me with Alex?" She froze, but it wasn't for long, and then she said yes. Right after that, she stood up and headed towards the kitchen. I told her to sit back down and that I wasn't done, but she still went to the fridge to get a silly yogurt cup, and only then did she come back. Honestly, I could already tell that she didn't seem to be remorseful based on her behavior. Why? Why did you think that was a good idea? And then she went into explaining how she has needs as a woman and I wasn't providing those needs for her. I pointed out right there that I had been in a freaking accident. I still had casts on, and her major concern was that there was no sex. I told her that if she had told me how dire her needs were, we could have found a way to sort things out, at least until I was healed, but she only shook her head and said it wouldn't have been the same. Honestly, in that moment, I was actually lost for words. I was expecting crying and pleading an obvious guilt, but the stupid woman in front of me was trying to justify her cheating. I asked her directly whether she was sorry, and she told me no. She repeated again that she had needs and I couldn't provide them, and that wasn't her fault that she wouldn't deny herself pleasure because I had gotten herself T-boned by an SUV. Yeah, I hate to admit it, but I lost all cool that I had at that moment. I struggled my feet and walked over to her in an intimidating way. I didn't raise a fist or anything, but as I approached her, she stood up and shoved me hard. I lost balance and hit our wooden coffee table on the way down. I hit my shoulder. Nothing was broken. I confirmed eventually, and I lay on the floor in pain. A few minutes later, I heard the front door close and her car start up and drive away. Yeah, my wife definitely assumed to be X, knocked me over, and didn't even check if I was okay. I literally had 2 casts on. It was a few minutes before I could struggle up onto the couch, and my shoulder was in a lot of pain. The first thing I did was call the police because I actually lost all respect and love for her in that moment. I was seeing red. Apparently, the noise of our argument had woken up my daughter, and she was hiding near the top of the stairs when she saw me get pushed. She started crying when she saw me in pain, and it broke my heart. She kept asking what had happened between me and her mom, but I really didn't know what to tell her. Eventually, the police came, took a report from me, and I was taken to the hospital, along with my daughter for an x-ray, though fortunately, there was no lasting damage to my shoulder. I mean, considering I was on the way to recovery, I'd have been pissed if I broke something else. As soon as I got back home that night, I put my daughter to bed and sent a message to the divorce lawyer, telling him that I was ready to go ahead with things. Christine hasn't come back home in the 3 days since that happened, and I haven't even contacted her. My daughter keeps asking where her mom is, but I had to make up a stupid excuse that she went to visit her sister. At this point, it's actually war, and I think I have everything I need to have things collapsed for Christine. She wasn't sorry for cheating on me, but my goal is to make her sorry. Final update. As I'm writing this, which should be the final update in my story, I'm doing so with a big smile on my face. I know it has been months since my last update, but if you're big fans of the sensation we call Schadenfreude, you're going to like this one. I know I do. The first thing that I did was send text messages to every single one of my Christine's relatives that I knew, from her parents to a cousin that I had only met twice. I even sent it to the friends whose numbers I had because I was pissed. I didn't write a single thing that wasn't true, and I even sent them the pictures I had taken of the flirting between her and Alex back then. Some of them responded, and some of them didn't. The ones who responded were more sympathetic, and I assumed most of those who didn't were on Christine's side. My job there was done. Whether they took her side or not, I made sure her sleazebag behavior was well documented. After that, I went into work and I met Christine there. She was shocked to see me, probably thinking I was too crushed to do anything. It was barely 10 seconds before I pointed to her and Alex, the employee she had been cheating on me with, and told them they were both fired. She used to be my wife, but she was merely an employee. Her name was nowhere in the paperwork from the business, and I'm glad I had never brought her in on that extent. Alex was surprised by the thudness of it all, but he couldn't argue because he knew he was guilty. He had worked for me for 3 years, and he was surely going to have a fun time trying to use me as a reference for whatever his next job was going to be. Meanwhile, Christine looked furious. She walked up to me. Honestly, I was scared I was going to get hit again, though that would have worked nicely for me. And when she was at arm's length, I spun the divorce papers on her. Her face turned red because our employees were there, but I didn't care. She snatched the papers from me and marched out of the place. The rest of the day was awkward, and I had to deal with a lot of cursing and text from her later, once she realized the full extent of people I had told about her cheating. Again, my story doesn't end there. It still gets good. You remember the assault? I had a police report and a hospital report, and I went to the police station at the close of business to report things. I told them I wanted to press charges. To skip through things a bit, my divorce lawyer was able to help me structure the case beautifully as a complete bonus, and considering this came after I confronted her for cheating, she was unremorseful. I was injured. She left me there, and my daughter witnessed it. She got a week in jail and mandatory anger management classes. I hate that my little girl had to get a bit involved, but for me, it was worth it. The criminal record gladdened my heart. Then, we got to the actual divorce proceedings. These lasted a long time, especially because Christine was being extremely stubborn throughout the thing, but ultimately, it was a breeze, because there was way too much document proof of bad behavior on my ex-wife's part. I mean, she had assaulted me, which she didn't deny. She had cheated on me, which she didn't deny. And she was very clearly unremorseful about either one of them. My daughter had to see her father assaulted, and again, that killed me. Now, I did mess up by firing her before I finalized the divorce, so I do have to pay a manageable amount of alimony, but only for 5 years. She's not a part of the business I built from the ground up. I have custody of my daughter because her mother's ability to control her temper and not bring strange men around my daughter is in question, and I get to keep the house because, well, I've ruined my little girl. I got to expose my wife's behavior to all her friends and give her a shiny criminal record. I honestly didn't set out to do all this, but she made it work for me since she's just naturally a horrible person. I wish I had seen it earlier, but it is what it is. I'm just glad the story is over and my daughter is safe with me. Life goes on, and I'll try and rebuild eventually, but for now, I'm happy with the way things went, and I hope you all are too. Edit. By the way, Alex had apparently the balls to put my name down as reference, and I made sure to professionally outline all his shortcomings as an employee, including the fact he may try to be inappropriate with the female partners of high-ranking employees. It was a fun to hear. Oh wow. Thank you for letting us know that. For the person on the other end, I guess no evil goes unpaid.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Ben, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a teacher at the local middle school, and I'd like to share something about my wife, Kathy, and me. Kathy is 30 and works as a nurse at the big hospital downtown. I still remember the day I met her like it was yesterday. I was at the grocery store, staring at apples, trying to figure out which ones to buy. I must have looked lost because this beautiful girl with long brown hair walked up and said, "The red ones are the sweetest." I smiled and said, "Thanks. I'm not the best at picking fruit." She laughed and introduced herself as Kathy, then offered to help me shop. We ended up walking around the store, talking and laughing, and by the time we reached the checkout, I knew I wanted to see her again. Feeling nervous, I asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Her eyes lit up as she said, "I'd love to." That was 4 years ago. We dated for 2 years, and those were the happiest times of my life. We had picnics in the park, watched movies together, and stayed up late talking about our dreams. Kathy was smart, funny, and kind. I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. On our second anniversary, I took her to her favorite restaurant. I wore a dark blue shirt with a bright tie to match her lovely blue dress. When dessert came, I got down on one knee, heart racing, and pulled out a small box. "Kathy," I said, "will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Ben, yes." The whole restaurant erupted in applause as I slipped the ring on her finger. It was the happiest moment of my life. 6 months later, we got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. Kathy looked stunning in her white dress, and I couldn't stop smiling as we said our vows. For the next 2 years, life was wonderful. We bought a small house with a backyard where we started a garden. On weekends, we'd spend time working in the yard together, planting flowers and vegetables. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch swing, talking about our day and watching the sunset. "I love our life together," Kathy would say, resting her head on my shoulder. "Me too," I'd reply, kissing her gently. Everything felt perfect. We had good jobs, a cozy home, and most importantly, each other. I thought we'd grow old together, maybe have kids someday. But 2 months ago, everything changed. It was an ordinary Tuesday night. We had just finished dinner, and I was washing the dishes while Kathy dried them. "Ben," she said, her voice suddenly serious, "I want to talk to you about something." I turned off the water and looked at her. "Sure, what's up?" Kathy took a deep breath. "I've been thinking, maybe we should try opening up our marriage." It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. "What do you mean?" I asked, though deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. "You know, seeing other people," Kathy continued, "just to spice things up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our perfect life suddenly felt anything but. My mouth went dry, and my heart started racing. "Open our marriage?" I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. "You mean, see other people?" Kathy nodded, biting her lip. "Yeah, I thought it might be fun to try something new." I shook my head firmly. "No way. I don't want to share you with anyone else." Kathy's face fell. She looked down at the floor, mumbling, "Oh, okay." We finished the dishes in silence, and that night, as we got ready for bed, things felt off. Kathy didn't say much, and when I tried to hug her, she barely hugged me back. As I lay there, unable to sleep, my mind raced with questions. Why did Kathy want to open our marriage? Was I not enough for her anymore? The next morning, I watched as she got ready for her shift at the hospital. Being a nurse meant she often worked odd hours, which made it difficult to talk about important things. "Have a good day at work," I said as she headed out the door. "Thanks," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, feeling awful. Maybe I had said no too quickly. What if Kathy thought I didn't care about what she wanted? For the next week, there was a palpable tension between us. Kathy worked a lot of night shifts, and we barely saw each other. When we did, it felt like there was a wall between us. One night, while I was grading papers in the living room, I heard the door open as Kathy came home from work. Kathy looked exhausted as she collapsed onto the couch next to me. How was your shift? I asked, trying to sound casual. Long, she sighed. We had a busy night in the ER. I put down my pen, turning to face her. Kathy, I said softly, can we talk about what you said last week? About opening our marriage? Her eyes widened in surprise. Oh, she said. Sure, I guess. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry I said no so quickly. I was just shocked. Can you tell me why you want to do this? Kathy shrugged. I don't know. I just thought it might be exciting to try something new. Her words made my stomach turn. Am I not exciting enough for you anymore? I asked, hating the way my voice sounded so small. Kathy's eyes widened. No, Ben, that's not it at all, she said quickly. I love you. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being silly. I reached out and took her hand. I love you too, I said, my voice wavering. But I'm scared. What if one of us falls for someone else? Kathy squeezed my hand. That wouldn't happen, she reassured me. It would just be for fun. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to make Kathy happy, but another part was terrified of losing her. Can I think about it some more? I asked. Kathy nodded. Of course, she said. There's no rush. As we got ready for bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. I love Kathy more than anything, but for the first time since we got married, I felt unsure about our future. A few days later, determined to try and make things better, I got home early from school and headed straight to the kitchen. I wanted to surprise her with her favorite meal, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread. I put on my blue apron and got to work. Soon, the kitchen filled with the rich smell of tomato sauce and garlic. I even set the table with our nice plates and lit a couple of candles. When Kathy walked in, her eyes widened in surprise. Ben, what's all this? I smiled and kissed her. I thought we could use a nice dinner together. Her face softened. It smells amazing, she said. We sat down to eat, and for a little while, things felt almost normal again. We talked about our day, shared silly jokes, and it felt good to see Kathy smile. After dinner, we moved to the living room with glasses of grape juice, since that's what we had in the fridge. I knew I had to bring up the topic of the open marriage again, even though the thought of it made me nervous. Kathy, I said, taking a deep breath, can we talk about what you said the other day? About opening our marriage? Her smile quickly faded. She set her glass down and looked at me. What about it? I tried to keep my voice calm. I've been thinking about it a lot. Can you tell me more about why you want to do this? Kathy's face flushed red. Why are you bringing this up now? She asked, her voice rising. I thought we were having a nice evening. I was surprised by how angry Kathy sounded. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said quickly. I just want to understand. Kathy stood up, her hands on her hips. Understand what? Are you trying to trick me or something? Now I was really confused. Trick you? Kathy, I'm not playing any games. I'm just trying to talk to you. Well, it doesn't feel like that, Kathy snapped. It feels like you're trying to catch me saying something wrong. I felt my own frustration building. That's not fair, I said. I'm trying my best here. Without a word, Kathy grabbed her glass and stormed off to the kitchen. I heard her dump the juice and place the glass in the sink with a loud clank. I'm going to bed, she called out. I sat there on the couch, feeling terrible. How had our nice dinner turned into this? I couldn't understand why Kathy had gotten so upset. I was just trying to talk things out. Later, when I finally went to bed, Kathy was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. She was curled up on her side of the bed, turned away from me. As I lay in the dark, confusion gnawed at me. Why was Kathy acting like this? Was she hiding something from me? I wanted to believe everything was okay, but a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that something wasn't right. I tossed and turned all night, my thoughts racing, unsure of what to do next. One thing was clear. Our marriage was in trouble, and I didn't know how to fix it. The next morning, I woke up early. Kathy was still asleep, so I quietly headed to the kitchen to make some coffee. As I sat at the table, sipping from my favorite mug, Kathy walked in, looking exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. Morning, I said softly. Want some coffee? Kathy nodded and sat down across from me. We sat there in silence for a while, the tension hanging in the air. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Kathy, I said, can we please talk about what's going on? She sighed and set her mug down. Fine. What do you want to know? I took a deep breath, bracing myself. Why did you really suggest opening our marriage? Please, be honest with me. Kathy looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting. It's stupid, she mumbled. I won't think it's stupid, I assured her. Just tell me. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. It's just, at work, some of the younger nurses are always talking about their wild weekends and dating adventures. And sometimes I feel like I'm missing out. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. Missing out? On what? I don't know, Kathy shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper. Excitement? Adventure? We got married so young, Ben. Sometimes I wonder if we're boring. I sat there, stunned. Boring? Was that really how she felt? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Boring? Kathy, I love our life together. I thought you did too. I do, she said quickly, almost offensively. Most of the time. But don't you ever wonder what else is out there? I shook my head firmly. No, I don't. You're all I want, Kathy. I thought I was all you wanted too. Kathy reached across the table and took my hand, her voice soft. You are. I'm sorry I brought this whole thing up. Can we just forget about it? I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Are you sure? Because if something's wrong, we need to fix it together. Nothing's wrong, Kathy replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I was just being silly. For the next few days, I tried to act like everything was normal, but it wasn't. Kathy seemed distant, always glued to her phone or working late. When we did spend time together, it felt like she was somewhere else, far away. One night, as we were watching TV, I turned to look at her. She was staring at her phone, barely paying attention to the show. Remember when we used to talk for hours? I asked, breaking the silence. Kathy looked up, startled, as if she hadn't heard me. Huh. Oh yeah, that was nice. We could do that now, I suggested, trying to bridge the growing gap between us. Talk, I mean. She gave me a small, tired smile. Maybe later, okay? I'm kind of tired. As Kathy went back to scrolling through her phone, I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest. Where was the girl who used to laugh at all my jokes? Who would dance with me in the kitchen while we made dinner? Who used to look at me like I was the most important person in the world? I missed that Kathy. I missed us. And I was starting to worry that maybe, just maybe, Kathy missed something else. Something I couldn't give her. That night, as I lay in bed listening to her quiet breathing, I couldn't help but wonder if our once happy marriage was slipping away, and if there was anything I could do to save it. As the weeks passed, things between us didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. Kathy started coming home later and later from work. At first, it was just an hour or two, but soon, she was getting home after I had already gone to bed. One night, I decided to wait up for her. When she finally walked in at 11:30, I was sitting on the couch in my pajamas. Ben, she said, looking surprised. Why are you still up? I tried to keep my voice calm. I was worried about you. You've been coming home so late these days, Kathy sighed, dropping her bag on the floor. I know. I'm sorry. Work has been crazy lately. Is everything okay at the hospital? I asked, trying to understand. Kathy nodded, but she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Yeah, it's just, there might be a promotion coming up. I'm trying to show I can handle more responsibility. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right. A promotion? That's great, but why didn't you tell me about it before? I didn't want to jinx it, she said quickly. Can we talk about this tomorrow? I'm really tired. Before I could say anything else, she headed to the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, feeling more confused and uneasy than ever. I sat there on the couch, feeling more confused than ever. The next day, I tried to push my worries aside. Maybe Kathy really was just working hard for that promotion. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. Kathy was constantly on her phone, smiling at text messages. Whenever I asked who she was talking to, she'd casually reply, people from work, and then quickly change the subject. She started going out more on weekends, saying she was meeting up with coworkers for drinks. One Saturday morning, as Kathy was getting ready to go out, I decided to finally ask her about it. You've been going out a lot lately, I said, trying to sound casual. Is everything okay? Kathy looked at me in the mirror as she put on her earrings. Of course, she said, her tone light. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know, I admitted, feeling a lump form in my throat. I guess I'm just feeling a bit left out. Kathy turned to face me, her expression softening. Oh, Ben, she said, giving me a quick hug. You don't need to worry. It's just work stuff. But as she pulled away, I noticed something. She wouldn't look me in the eye. My stomach knotted, like I'd swallowed a rock. That night, as I lay in bed alone, waiting for Kathy to come home, I couldn't stop my mind from racing. Was Kathy really just focused on work? Or was there something, or someone else? I didn't want to believe that Kathy might be lying to me. She was my wife, my best friend. We'd promised to love and trust each other forever. But as I listened to the quiet tick of the clock, waiting for the sound of her key in the door, I couldn't help but wonder if those promises still held any meaning for her. I tried to push these thoughts away. Don't jump to conclusions, I told myself. Kathy loves you. There has to be a good explanation for all of this. But deep down, a little voice kept whispering that something was very, very wrong. One Tuesday, I decided to do something nice for Kathy. I got home early from school and started making our favorite dinner, lasagna with extra cheese. The kitchen soon filled with the comforting aroma of tomatoes and garlic. Just as I was putting the lasagna in the oven, my phone buzzed with a text from Kathy. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Sorry. My heart sank. I looked at the lasagna and felt foolish for even trying. But then an idea popped into my head. What if I surprised Kathy at work? I could bring her some lasagna, and maybe we could eat together in her office. It would be like old times when we used to have little picnics together. I waited for the lasagna to finish cooking, then cut a big piece and put it in a container. I even packed some garlic bread and a can of Kathy's favorite soda. The drive to the hospital took about 20 minutes. The whole way there, I kept thinking about how happy Kathy would be to see me. Maybe this would help us get back to normal. When I got to the hospital, I went to the front desk. A young woman with curly hair was sitting there. Hi, I said, holding up the container. I'm here to see Kathy. I'm her husband, Ben. I brought her some dinner. The woman looked at her computer screen, then back at me with a confused expression. I'm sorry, but Kathy left about an hour ago. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water over me. Left? But she texted me saying she was working late. The woman shrugged. I'm sorry, but I saw her leave myself. She said she was done for the day. My mind was spinning. Where was Kathy if she wasn't at work? Why would she lie to me? Are you sure? I asked, my voice shaking a little. Maybe she came back? The woman shook her head. No, I've been here the whole time. She definitely left. I mumbled a thank you and walked out of the hospital, still holding the container of lasagna. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. As I got back in my car, I didn't know what to do. Should I call Kathy? Drive around looking for her? Go home and wait? I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of worry and confusion. Finally, I sent Kathy a text. Hope work isn't too stressful. Love you. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her reply. Thanks. It's pretty busy here. See you later. I stared at the message, feeling sick to my stomach. Kathy was lying to me. She wasn't at work. She was somewhere else, doing who knows what. As I drove home, the container of lasagna sitting cold in the passenger seat, I felt like my whole world was falling apart. What was happening to us? Where was my wife, and why didn't she want me to know? I had so many questions, but I was afraid of what the answers might be. I barely slept that night. When I heard Kathy come home, I pretended to be asleep. I didn't know what to say to her. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee. Kathy came into the kitchen, yawning. Morning, I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice felt strained. Morning, she replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept well. How was work last night? I asked, keeping my tone light. Oh, you know the usual. Busy. She avoided eye contact as she stirred her coffee. I wanted to push further, to ask her about her late nights and her secretive behavior, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I made lasagna yesterday, but I didn't get to give you any. Want to have it for dinner tonight? Her eyes brightened for a moment before she quickly masked it with a neutral expression. Sure, that sounds nice. As we sipped our coffee in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The warmth and laughter that used to fill our mornings seemed like a distant memory. I needed to find a way to address the elephant in the room, but I wasn't sure how to start without escalating things further. I took a deep breath. Kathy, we need to talk. She froze, her hand on the coffee pot. About what? About last night, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I went to the hospital to surprise you with dinner. Kathy's face went pale. You did? I nodded. The receptionist said you'd left an hour earlier. But you told me you were working late. Kathy's eyes darted around the room, not meeting mine. Oh, yeah. I had a meeting off-site. A meeting? I pressed, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Why didn't you mention it before? It doesn't add up, Kathy. She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think it was important. Things are just hectic at work right now. Are they really? I asked, my heart racing. Or is there something else going on that you're not telling me? Kathy's expression tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. Instead, she crossed her arms defensively. Ben, I told you it's just work. Can we not do this right now? But you texted me saying you were busy at work, I said. Kathy's cheeks flushed. Did I? I meant I was busy with work stuff. The meeting was for work. My stomach twisted. Where was this meeting? At a coffee shop, Kathy replied quickly. Near the hospital? I pressed. Yeah, she said. Which coffee shop? I asked. Kathy hesitated. I don't remember the name. It was just some local place. I could feel my heart racing. Kathy, please, just tell me the truth. Where were you last night? Kathy's expression hardened. I told you, I was at a meeting. Why are you interrogating me like this? Because your story doesn't make sense, I replied, my voice rising. Why didn't you tell me about this meeting beforehand? Why did you lie about being at the hospital? Kathy slammed her mug down on the counter. I didn't lie. I was working. Just because you showed up uninvited doesn't mean I owe you a minute-by-minute account of my day. Her words struck me like a slap. Uninvited? Kathy, I'm your husband. I was trying to do something nice for you. Kathy's eyes filled with tears. I know. I'm sorry. I'm under a lot of stress right now. I wanted to believe her. I wanted things to be okay, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. Is there something going on? I asked softly. Something you're not telling me? Kathy wiped her eyes. No, Ben. There's nothing going on. Can we please just drop this? I nodded, feeling defeated. Okay, but Kathy, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? She gave me a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. I know. I'm going to get ready for work. As Kathy left the kitchen, I sat there feeling more confused and hurt than ever. I loved Kathy more than anything, but I felt like I was losing her. She was slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on. That night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to watch TV, I realized something had broken between us, and I was terrified that I didn't know how to fix it. A few days after our fight, I woke up early on Saturday morning. Kathy was still asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up her phone. My heart was pounding as I typed in her birthday, the password she'd always used. The phone unlocked. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then I noticed a chat with someone named Roger from work. I tapped on it, and my world fell apart. There were messages. Lots of messages. And pictures. The kind of pictures a wife shouldn't be sending to another man. I felt sick. The room was spinning. I stumbled to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the tub, still holding Kathy's phone, staring at the evidence of her betrayal. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? I scrolled through the messages, each one feeling like a knife in my heart. Suddenly, I heard Kathy's voice from the bedroom. Ben, have you seen my phone? I didn't answer. I couldn't speak. Her footsteps came closer. Ben, are you in there? I can't find my phone. I still said nothing. My mind was racing. I needed proof. I couldn't let Kathy delete these messages and deny everything. With shaking hands, I started forwarding the messages and photos to my own email address. Kathy's knocking got louder. Ben, are you okay? Why is the door locked? I'm fine. I managed to croak out. Just give me a minute. Ben, I really need my phone. I'm supposed to meet some coworkers for brunch. Coworkers? Like Roger? The thought made me want to throw up. Have you seen it? Kathy called through the door. It's not on my nightstand. I looked down at the phone in my hand. No, I lied. I haven't seen it. Are you sure? Can you come out and help me look? In a minute, I said, my voice breaking. Kathy must have heard something in my tone because her voice changed. Ben, what's going on? Open the door. I didn't answer. I was still forwarding messages, my fingers moving as fast as they could. Kathy started banging on the door. Ben, open this door right now. What are you doing? I finished sending the last email to myself just as Kathy's pounding reached a frantic pitch. Ben, I know you have my phone. Open this door. I stood up, my legs feeling weak. I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized the pale, shaken man staring back at me. I'm coming out, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. As I reached for the door handle, I took a deep breath. In a few seconds, I was going to confront my wife about her betrayal. Our lives were about to change forever. I turned the handle and opened the door. I didn't confront Kathy right away. I couldn't. I was too hurt, too angry. Instead, I just watched her. A week after I found the messages, Kathy said she had to work late again. This time, I decided to follow her. I felt awful doing it, like I was in some bad movie. I'd had a few drinks to steady my nerves, which probably wasn't the smartest choice, but I needed to know the truth. I watched as Kathy's car pulled into the parking lot of the Pinewood Hotel. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She was really doing this. After a few minutes, I stumbled out of my car. The world felt a bit wobbly from the drinks, but I made my way to the hotel lobby. There she was at the front desk, talking to the clerk. "Kathy," I called out, my voice louder than I intended. She spun around, her face draining of color. "Ben, what are you doing here?" I walked toward her, struggling to keep my balance. "I could ask you the same thing. Meeting Roger for a little work meeting?" The clerk behind the desk looked uncomfortable. "Sir, is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice breaking. "Everything is not okay. My wife is cheating on me." Kathy's eyes went wide as she grabbed my arm and tried to pull me away from the desk. "Ben, you're drunk. Let's go outside and talk." I yanked my arm away. "I don't want to go anywhere with you. I saw the messages, Kathy. I saw the pictures. How could you do this to me?" Kathy's face crumpled as she pleaded. "Ben, please. It's not what you think. I can explain." I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Explain? Explain what?" "How you've been lying to me. How you've been sneaking around behind my back." The clerk interjected. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you can't calm down." I ignored him, my focus solely on Kathy. "Was I not good enough for you? Did you get bored with our boring life?" Tears streamed down Kathy's face now. "No, Ben. It's not like that. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. This is a choice. You chose to do this." Kathy reached for me again. "Please, let's go home. We can talk about this. We can fix this." I stepped back, nearly tripping over my own feet. "Fix this? There's no fixing this, Kathy. You broke us." I turned and stumbled toward the door, the weight of her words suffocating me. I could hear her calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. Somehow, I made it to my car. Knowing I was too drunk to drive, I called the only person I could think of, my friend Alex. "Can you come get me?" I asked when he answered. "I'm at the Pinewood Hotel." Kathy's cheating on me." Alex didn't ask questions. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't move." As I sat in my car, waiting for Alex, I watched Kathy come out of the hotel. She looked around, probably searching for me. I sank down in my seat, not wanting her to see me. When Alex arrived, I got into his car without a word. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Kathy in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the hotel parking lot. It was the last time I saw her for a long time. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at Alex's place, sleeping on his couch and trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't bear the thought of going home and facing Kathy. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Then I started doing things I never thought I'd have to do. First, I went to the bank. My hands shook as I spoke to the teller. "I need to freeze our joint accounts," I said, "and I want to open a new account in just my name." The teller looked at me with sympathy. She must have seen this before. "Of course, sir. I can help you with that." Next, I changed all my passwords, email, social media, everything. It felt strange, like I was locking Kathy out of my life. But I guess that's exactly what I was doing. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from her. I couldn't bring myself to read or answer them. Each time her name appeared on the screen, my heart hurt all over again. On Tuesday, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I went to the doctor for STD tests. The nurse was kind, but I still felt a deep sense of shame. "The results will take a few days," she told me. "We'll call you when they're ready." I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. By Wednesday, I was a complete wreck. I hadn't slept properly in days. My phone showed over 50 missed calls from Kathy and more text messages than I could count. Alex was worried about me. "You need to talk to someone," he said over breakfast. "Not Kathy, but maybe a lawyer. Remember from school? He works at a law firm. He might be able to help." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. I called Alex, and he agreed to meet us for lunch. Alex was a big guy with a kind face. He listened as I stumbled through my story, my voice cracking several times. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," Alex said when I finished, "but you're doing the right things. Freezing the accounts was smart. What do I do now?" I asked, feeling completely lost. Alex leaned forward. "Well, if you're sure you want a divorce, We should start the proceedings as soon as possible. I know a good divorce lawyer. Want me to set up a meeting? The word divorce hit me like a punch to the gut, but I nodded. Yeah, I think that's what I need to do. As we left the restaurant, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Kathy. Without looking at it, I turned off my phone. You'll have to talk to her eventually, Alex said gently. I know, I replied, but not yet. I can't. I can't face her yet. That night, as I lay on Alex's couch, staring at the ceiling, I received a call from the doctor's office. My test results were negative. I felt relieved, but it was a small comfort amid the storm of emotions I was experiencing. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered how my life had fallen apart so quickly. Just a few weeks ago, I thought Kathy and I would be together forever. Now, I was preparing to divorce the woman I had once believed was the love of my life. A week after my meeting with Alex, he called me. I was still staying at Alex's place, trying to figure out my next steps. Ben, Alex said, his voice serious. Kathy reached out to me. What did she want? I asked, dreading the answer. Alex sighed. She's begging for a chance to reconcile. Says she wants to explain everything. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of anger and sadness wash over me. Did she explain to you? She tried, Alex said. Claims the hookups meant nothing, that she made a huge mistake and wants to make it right. I laughed bitterly. A mistake? She had an affair, Alex. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I know, buddy, Alex said softly. Look, I need to go to your house and get some of your stuff. Kathy agreed to let me in. Do you want me to talk to her? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me was curious about what Kathy had to say, but another part couldn't bear to hear it. Just get my clothes and important papers, I said finally. Don't talk to her more than you have to. Alex agreed, and we hung up. An hour later, he called me back. I've got your stuff, he said. But Ben, Kathy was there. She was pretty upset. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? Alex's voice was gentle. She was crying, saying she regrets everything. She wants to talk to you, to explain. I think she's really struggling with what she's done. She was crying, begging me to help her fix things with you. Said she'd do anything to make it right. I felt a lump in my throat. What did you tell her? I told her that you need time and space, Alex said. That if she really wants to make things right, she needs to respect that. I nodded, even though Alex couldn't see me. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. There's one more thing, Alex added hesitantly. She wrote you a letter. Asked me to give it to you. I've got it here with your stuff. My heart raced at the thought of a letter from Kathy. Part of me wanted to read it, to understand why she did what she did. But another part knew it would only hurt more. Don't give it to me yet, I said. I'm not ready. Okay, Alex said. I'll keep it safe. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, it'll be here. After we hung up, I sat on Alex's couch, my head in my hands. Kathy wanted to reconcile. She claimed the hookups meant nothing. But how could I ever trust her again? How could I look at her without seeing those messages, those pictures? Alex came in and saw me sitting there. You okay, man? I looked up at him, feeling lost. Kathy wants to reconcile. She told Alex the hookups meant nothing. Alex sat down next to me. What do you want to do? I shook my head. I don't know. I love her, Alex. Or I loved who I thought she was. But how can I ever trust her again? Alex put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to decide anything right now. Take your time. Figure out what you really want. As I nodded, I realized that's exactly what I needed to do. Take time. Think. Decide if there was anything left of my marriage worth saving. 2 weeks after Alex brought me my stuff, I finally felt ready to start the divorce proceedings. I met with the lawyer Alex recommended, a kind but firm woman named Sarah. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Sarah asked as we sat in her office. The walls were lined with law books, and her desk was neat and organized. It made me feel like my messy life might have some order soon. I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, I'm sure. I can't go back to how things were. Sarah nodded and started explaining the process. As she talked about property division and legal terms, my mind wandered. How did Kathy and I end up here? Just a few months ago, we were talking about starting a family. Now, we were discussing ending our marriage. A week later, Sarah called me. Her voice sounded strained. Ben, we've hit a snag. Kathy is refusing to sign the divorce papers. My heart sank. What? Why? She says she wants to reconcile, Sarah explained. She's asking for marriage counseling before moving forward with any legal proceedings. I felt a mix of frustration and sadness wash over me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What kind of accusations? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah sighed, her tone heavy with concern. She's claiming that her actions were a result of your emotional neglect. She says you pushed her away, made her feel unloved. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the nights I stayed late at work, the times I brushed off her feelings, thinking I was providing for us. It all came crashing down around me. I hadn't realized how my actions, or lack thereof, had affected her. Is she serious? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. I never meant to make her feel that way. I thought we were okay. I know, Ben, but she's making these claims, and they could impact the divorce proceedings, Sarah said. We'll need to address this head-on. It's important that you gather your thoughts and be prepared for any mediation or counseling sessions. I leaned back against the couch, feeling lost. What if she's right? What if I really did push her away? Then you need to confront that, Sarah advised gently. You can't change the past, but you can acknowledge it. This might be a chance for you to reflect on your own feelings, too. I nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. I had to take responsibility for my part in this, but I also needed to stand my ground. Thanks, Sarah. I'll think about it. After we hung up, I stared blankly at the wall, the silence heavy around me. Kathy's accusations twisted in my mind, battling with my memories of our life together. I picked up my phone and dialed Alex's number again. Hey, he answered, and I could hear the concern in his voice. What's going on? Kathy is claiming I pushed her away, that I neglected her emotionally, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know what to think. Listen, man, relationships are complex, Alex replied. It's not all on you. But if you think there's some truth to her words, maybe it's worth exploring. Talk to her. Find out what she really feels. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest. Yeah, maybe I should. But it's hard to face her after everything. Just remember, you deserve to know the truth, too. Whatever that is, he said. As I hung up, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to confront this head-on. I couldn't let Kathy's accusations define me or dictate my actions anymore. I loved her, and I did everything I could to make her happy. I know, Ben, Sarah said soothingly. These are just tactics to delay the process or gain leverage. We'll handle it. But Kathy wasn't finished. A few days later, Sarah called again. Kathy is now asking for alimony, she said. She claims the divorce is causing her mental distress and that she needs financial support. I laughed bitterly. Mental distress? What about my mental distress? She's the one who cheated. I know it's frustrating, Sarah replied, but try to stay calm. We'll fight this. As the weeks dragged on, I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster. One day, I'd be furious at Kathy for her actions and for dragging out the divorce. The next day, I'd find myself looking through old photos of us, wondering where it all went wrong. Alex did their best to keep me distracted. We'd hit the gym together or have movie nights to take my mind off things. But in the quiet moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, the pain would come rushing back. One evening, while Alex and I were having dinner, he looked at me seriously. Ben, I know this is tough, but you need to start thinking about moving on. I pushed my food around on my plate. How am I supposed to do that when Kathy won't even sign the papers? Alex leaned forward. I'm not talking about dating or anything like that. I mean focusing on yourself. What do you want out of life? What makes you happy? His words resonated deeply with me. I had been so fixated on the pain of losing Kathy that I had forgotten about myself. I don't know, I admitted. It's been so long since I thought about what I want. Well, now's the time to start, Alex said with a smile. Why don't you sign up for that photography class you always talked about? The idea of doing something for myself felt strange yet exciting. The next day, I enrolled in a beginner's photography course at the local community college. As I immersed myself in learning about apertures and shutter speeds, I felt a small spark of joy for the first time in months. It wasn't much, but it was something. I also began seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez. At first, I was hesitant to open up, but gradually, I found myself looking forward to our sessions. Ben, Dr. Martinez said one day, I want you to think about something. What would your ideal life look like if you could design it from scratch? I sat there, contemplating. I'm not sure. I guess I'd want to be happy, have a job I love, maybe travel more. Dr. Martinez nodded. Those are great goals. Now, how can you start working towards them? Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I immersed myself in photography, even taking on some small freelance jobs. I started planning a solo trip to Europe, something I'd always wanted to do but had postponed. Just as I began to feel like I was making progress, Kathy threw another wrench into the works. Sarah called me, her voice tight with frustration. Kathy's lawyer is now claiming that your decision to pursue photography and travel is an attempt to dissipate marital assets, she explained. They're trying to use it against you in the property division. I felt a surge of anger. That's ridiculous. I'm just trying to live my life. Sarah sighed. I know, Ben. We'll fight it. But I have to warn you, this might get uglier before it gets better. That night, as I lay in bed in Alex's spare room, I felt a swirl of emotions. Anger at Kathy for trying to control my life even now, sadness for the love we'd lost, but also a glimmer of hope. Despite everything, I was starting to envision a future for myself, one that didn't revolve around Kathy. I picked up my camera, which I now kept on the bedside table, and began fiddling with the settings. As I looked through the viewfinder, adjusting the focus, I realized something. Life, much like photography, was all about perspective. Right now, my view was blurry and dark, but with time and effort, I could adjust, refocus, and maybe, just maybe, capture something beautiful again. The next morning, I called Sarah. I want to push forward with the divorce, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. No matter what Kathy throws at us, I'm ready to fight. I need to move on with my life. Sarah's voice was warm with approval. That's great, Ben. We'll make it happen. It might take time, but we'll get there. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead would be tough, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. One step at a time, one day at a time, I would rebuild my life. And who knew? Maybe someday I'd look back on this painful chapter as the beginning of something new and wonderful. It's been 6 months since I first discovered Kathy's affair. The divorce is finally over, and I'm sitting in my new apartment, looking through some of my recent photographs. As I flip through the images, I can't help but reflect on everything that's happened. Sometimes, I still can't believe how things turned out. The Kathy I thought I knew and the woman she turned out to be are two completely different people. Throughout the divorce, her behavior shocked me. The lies, the blame shifting, the attempts to manipulate me. It was like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. You okay, man? Alex's voice snaps me out of my thoughts. He's helping me unpack the last of my boxes. I nod, managing a small smile. Yeah, just thinking about everything. Alex sits down next to me. It's been a wild ride, huh? That's an understatement, I say with a dry laugh. You know, when this all started, I thought I was the one who did something wrong. I kept wondering what I could have done differently. And now? Alex prompts. I take a deep breath. Now I realize that Kathy's choices were her own. Her narcissism, her inability to take responsibility, that's not on me. It never was. Alex nods approvingly. That's right. You can't control other people's actions, only your own. His words remind me of something Dr. Martinez said in one of our sessions. Self-respect is crucial, I say, echoing my therapist's words. I learned that the hard way. For a while there, I was ready to forgive Kathy, to try and make things work. But that would have meant sacrificing my self-respect. I'm proud of you for standing your ground, Alex says, patting my shoulder. I smile, grateful for his support. Thanks. You know, Kathy tried to reconcile right up until the end. She sent messages through Alex and wrote letters. For a moment, I was tempted. But then I remembered all the lies and manipulation. I realized I deserved better than that. As I say these words, I feel their truth deep in my bones. I did deserve better. I still do. So, what's next for Ben, the newly single photography enthusiast? Alex asks, a teasing tone in his voice. I laugh, feeling lighter than I have in months. Well, I've got that trip to Europe coming up, and I'm thinking of turning the spare room into a darkroom for my photography. Sounds great. Alex replies. You know, I don't think I've seen you this excited about something in a long time. His words make me pause. He's right. Despite everything I've been through, or maybe because of it, I feel hopeful, excited, even. I guess I'm finally looking forward instead of backward, I say. As Alex and I finish unpacking, I think about the future. I know it won't always be easy. There will be days when the pain of what happened with Kathy resurfaces and days when I'll question everything all over again. But I also know that I'm stronger now. I've learned to value myself and stand up for what I believe in. I've realized it's okay to put myself first sometimes. Most importantly, I've learned that life goes on. It might not look like what I had planned, but that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful in its own way. As the sun sets outside my new apartment, I pick up my camera. Through the viewfinder, I see the world in a new light, full of possibilities, waiting to be captured. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what develops. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.